I'm not even doing the intro. I'm just jumping back on. I don't know what happened to Fair Use Act. You guys know what the Fair Use Act is?
Honestly, bro, like you were playing with us on the screen.
I don't think it's Joe Rogan that's doing this, but
I think it might be automatic though, dude. I don't know if
automatic system that, because I don't think him or his company would do that. Like I don't think they would just take people down. Look, fair use. Fair use is a doctrine in the United States law that permits limited use of copyrighted material without having first to acquire permission from the copyright holder. Fair use is one of the limitations to copyright intended to balance the interests of copyright holders, blah, 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 blah. Basically, it means you could play stuff as long as you're reacting to it or sort of changing it a little bit, so it's not like you're not just making money off replaying someone else's stuff. Dude, we were on the screen the whole time. We were pausing it every 5 seconds.
It felt like that. I mean, I don't know, dude. I feel like we should play a few of the highlights like you had.
Do you
I
want me to pull
wanted
up?
to get into the eyewitness stuff. You know what I mean? But
I do too. Is there a video that is there a clips of this video from Joe Rogan's channel?
You tell me.
What about why don't we pull up what's his name's video from today? Alex
O'Connor?
Yeah.
Yeah, be careful too, because it's a big channel.
I don't think he's that big. Joe Rogan's just so big that you can't react to his stuff. I don't think Alex is that big.
No. But I think the way he played certain clips from it were short enough.
Yeah,
we might have gone too long on a couple of them.
Well, I'm saying, what if we just play Alex O'Connor's clip and talk about our own thoughts on it? Because he brings all the major blunders are in that video. Like he covers them all. He covers them all. By the way, I was correct before anyone. I'm Wes. We just caught Wes on a blunder that I haven't heard anyone point out yet. He said that Sumerian he called it Afro-Semitic. Now, maybe Afro-Semitic is a term. I don't know. Maybe that is a term. Afro-Asiatic is the term that I'm familiar with. Semitic languages branch out of Afro-Asiatic, just like Egyptian and Coptic does. Sumerian is not Semitic. Sumerian is pre-Semitic. The Sumerians existed in Mesopotamia before the Sargon of Akkad. The Akkadians are the Semites that ruled Mesopotamia. I looked it up while you were gone, and I was correct. So Wes Huff is wrong to call the Sumerians Afro-Semitic languages. That's not correct. And you just went on this big spiel about how you studied all these languages and how you study linguistics and how you know all this stuff. That's a big blunder. I knew this without even being an expert in linguistics. I knew that Sumerian was pre-Semitic. So that's bad.
But you're also secretly a PhD and you haven't shown that to the world yet. So
right. Yeah.
You know.
I'll see if I can pull up the Alex O'Connor video
that we had until then. Take a listen.
So when you say the book of Isaiah is intact, how similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked...
We literally pushed back what we know about Isaiah 1,000 years.
Someone said, do a quick prayer.
Maybe that's why I got kicked off and that I wasn't praying enough.
That's
I just realized there were super chats in that one that I couldn't even get to because they kicked us off. Oh. So I apologize. I don't remember. I can't get to them.
Hold on.
If you guys,
let me try to go to that link.
Thank you. If you can find it in there,
studio.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to go in there and add me back in because it's your StreamYard.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'll be able. I'll see if I can go back to it. But let's finish this first. All right. So he says that we pushed us back what we know about Isaiah 1,000 years. I have an issue with this because this assumes that all we know about Isaiah was in the modern Bibles that we had in 1950, as if there are no other textual, as if there isn't quotes from the Talmud about Isaiah, as if we can't piece together other parts of Isaiah from other sources that we have. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Homer Homer, for example, I always talk about Homer because it's a good comparison to the Bible. We don't have manuscripts of Homer for centuries down the line. I think like 2nd century AD is the oldest Homer manuscript, something crazy like that. Whereas Homer's written in 8th century BC. But we can piece together, we can do some textual criticism of Homer based on people citing Homer and quoting from Homer in other sources. So Isaiah, the Masoretic Isaiah, wasn't the only source for Isaiah that we had. There's other sources that we can look at to compare Isaiah to. That makes sense?
Yeah, I get it. Is there other writings that are not the book of Isaiah that are referencing or quoting or mentioning Isaiah, and that's something we can look to? What's your point?
Yeah. Anyways,
Shocked scholars. Like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be amazing if it
Oh,
were
it's face, dude.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Wow.
true. In fact, the Dead Sea version of the Isaiah scroll is not quite identical to the Masoretic text. That is the one that we know from the Bible. Can you guess how many textual variants there are between the two? Take a guess. 1 that Wes forgot about? 10? 100? Try more than
I'm gonna copy and paste
2,600. Yeah.
The link?
Now, most of these variants are small. They're differences in spelling, for example, but some of them are more significant. For instance, in Isaiah chapter 2, the end of verse 9 and
Isaiah.
all of verse 10 are simply missing from the Dead Sea version. They're just not there, which tells us that they were a later addition. Here are some words from the Digital Dead Sea Scrolls project by the Israel Museum, which houses the Isaiah scroll. The text of the Great Isaiah scroll generally confirms the Masoretic or traditional version codified in medieval codices, all 66 chapters of the Hebrew version in the same conventional order. At the same time, however, the 2,000-year-old scroll contains alternative spellings,
Pause it.
scribal errors, corrections.
I think we should pause it more often because we don't want to risk it shutting down.
Yeah, I'm
again.
also going to speed it up a little bit too, but which I thought that would have helped us too, but whatever.
So someone was saying they wish we brought up the super chats as we go, and in case something does shut down again, just
Okay.
so that they're in context. Is what they're saying.
Alex with the super chat says Derek and Neil on the Joe Rogan's podcast next. Absolutely. I'll be down for that.
I told and just on that, I told Neil, like, if I go, I will ask. I'll do everything I can. If Neil goes, he'll do everything he can to try and get us to go as sidekicks in this, because first of all, I imagine Joe would be pretty like, oh, dude, I'm talking to a Green Beret Special Forces son because he's big into the whole military stuff. So I come from that background. Me and Neil both survived drug addiction. We both survived fundamentalism. And we both have this knack and an obsession for the ancient world and learning history and mythology and these strange cultic rites and all this stuff we're into. I think you'd be impressed.
By the way, I did find those other super chats from the other. I was able to go back into the studio and find them. So let's just do them. Let's just do them. Yeah, let's do them. Let's do them.
Okay.
First one's from Pat Lowinger. Discovery Ancient History. I don't know who that guy is. He's some loser. Who cares? I'm not going to read it. No, I'm just kidding. Is Wes getting his PhD in bullshito?
Yes.
What he said.
I would
funny.
say at least partly. I mean, if he's getting true scholarship, he's also eating from a buffet of apologetic, defend my stuff at all costs kind of, material.
Right. Tiger Shark says, Hal Dilutes and Guttari, the real D&G. Big ups, GI. Keep it rolling. NASA-funded grad degree, abiogenesis on your side. That was a lot there. I appreciate that. Chuck Lyons, 454 with $5 says, I want to see Danny Jones or Joe Rogan, Gnostic informant, Dr. Hillman, Wesley Huff, and one other person of Wesley's choice. Damn. That would be a crazy lineup, or if that was all one shot or a discussion. I think there'd be some fights going on too.
For sure.
And then Pat Lowinger once again comes back with a 2 and says, performative prayer on YouTube seems disingenuous. Absolutely. That
was back there.
Dear God, thank you for making us debunk people on the internet.
Make me ruin this guy's career.
Of course you care about that stuff, right? You're not petty.
Yeah, and in
That's
my
so
particular
crazy.
theology too,
That's
I'm
so
glad that-
crazy and self-centered to think that you're so special that God needs you to be his instrument to go on the internet and debate people about aliens or whatever.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And then Eric Shaver with the 10 says, keep in mind, even charlatans have to grapple with the existence of God. It's inescapable. Time equals Jesus. Whoa. Got him.
Oh,
That was big.
shit.
That was deep. I think you got me. I think you changed everything I think about everything. Thank you for that. Thanks for the
I'm going
10
back
now.
to the fundamentalist church I came from now.
Right. So let's keep playing this.
And most fundamentally, many variant readings. Strictly speaking, the number of textual variants is well over 2,600, ranging from a single letter, sometimes one or more words, to complete variant verse or verses. Well over 2,600. Again, many of these variants are minor, but Wes Huff told Joe Rogan that the scroll is word for word identical with the Masoretic text.
That was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Which is simply not true. Okay, moving on to the New Testament.
Was it the book of Isaiah?
Yeah.
That the same book is exactly the same as, like, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
That's pretty fun.
That is a miracle, right?
still would
Would it be a
argue with that
miracle?
warning.
No, it wouldn't be a miracle, but it would be very fast. It would be like crazy that people preserved a text for thousands of years exactly the same.
Bingo.
But the fact that it's not true is kind of sucks. That's like, wait, whoa, look, we found this miracle. Oh, it's not true. Oh, fuck.
Right. Imagine if we found, I mean, there's some interesting stuff that we're finding out more and more about, but like the Enuma Elish, right? We were talking about that. They found a Greek version where it's been kind of reworked into a Greek 5th, 6th century CE, Common Era, worked in version. Imagine we found that, but had none of the tablets that we end up discovering. And then we end up discovering this 2nd millennium Enuma Elish or 1st millennium, like thousands of years earlier. And imagine it's the same. Now it's a miracle, or that doesn't count. It's because we have this American Christianized kind of propaganda system, and everyone's already kind of predisposed to Christianity and its truth claims and its apologetics and stuff. Notice that if we found any of that for anything else, it wouldn't be a miracle. It would not validate that God or the gods of the pantheon of the ancient Mesopotamians. Like, it's just Christianity, our special religion.
Right. That's crazy.
It is.
All right, let's see these guys.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
If you just imagine the sheer number of illiterate people, the sheer number of days that have to go by where people are telling the story exactly the same, and that it's entrusted in the hands of these very few people that are so dedicated to it that they get the exact words right 1,000 years later, pretty bananas.
Well, I mean, that
Pretty bananas, and it's not true.
is kind of the crazy thing about Christianity, where you have
tradition,
this
though.
Jewish
Like,
Right.
that was what you were doing when you passed along. You were trained to try to, keep it going.
But what's so funny about that is how many interpolations and forgeries and omissions that we find throughout all the textual tradition of Christianity is so alarming that the reaction is it should be the exact opposite. How badly Christians have reworked their tradition over the centuries, have went back and added December 25th to manuscripts that had a different date for Jesus's birth. That's one example. How they went back and added the Trinity into John, 1 John, where the 1 John 5:7 didn't have an explicit Trinity in it at first.
Right.
But then they were like, this has to have the Trinity. Like they went back and they reworked their whole entire Bible to some degree.
Yeah, the way they interpret even Jesus being a demigod is through a Trinitarian lens. Now, you got to get the super chat, bro. This is so good. I love people like this who super chat.
Tommy Radcliffe, thanks for the super chat. Says you two are lost little boys. Wes is very informed, and I have studied for 62 years while flying the world as an airline pilot for 22 years. The answers are clear, yet you look to the world to know. Wow.
I don't know where else to look other than the world we live in, and to try and.
I am so humbled by this person right here.
I am too.
They traveled the world, but I'm looking to the world. I don't know what that's supposed to mean.
Look, they were flying the world, okay, and we're looking to the world. So
Right.
help us out. I'm sure the audience has some.
They
really
don't like.
good
They hate
comments.
the world. We love the world, but you travel the world, and I don't travel the world. I don't know.
But hold
Black-
on, wasn't the Prince of the Air flying around the world? Are you saying that you're the Prince of the Air here?
Probably.
You're. I'm. No, seriously though.
This person studied for 62 years. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
They know everything. So, got them.
I'm impressed.
I'm impressed.
Thank
Thank you
you
for the
so
super
much.
chat, though. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
itinerant guy who's walking around first century Roman occupied Judea. He's making some pretty audacious claims to be God himself, and then he predicts his own death and resurrection.
Wrong. Jesus never says, "I am God himself." Not only that, is we don't know what he said. We only know what the Gospels tell us. Most of the Gospels don't have Jesus saying he's God himself. Now, maybe you can make the case that in John's Gospel is a little more he's more divine. In a Roman religion context, a Roman imperial cult context, he might just be a deity, not a deus, but a deity. We don't know how divine he is.
Mhm.
I'm still like this. So we can have a discussion about the divinity of Jesus, but he's walking around saying, "I am God himself" is a strong claim that's not backed up by the sources.
Yeah, that was an immediate apologetic.
Yeah.
Again, anachronistic. He's the Trinity, one with the
He turns off his scholar hat whenever he feels like he needs to, and then turns it back on another met.
Your point is a really good one too, because if you go back, if you were to just, let's pretend we ignored Greco-Roman, which we shouldn't when we're reading Greek literature of the Gospels, but even if you went back to just the Hebrew Bible and you looked at Elijah, Elisha, even Moses, they are Ish Elohim. They are man gods. Now that doesn't mean they are God. They have a divine. Close this. They have a divine pedigree in the sense that the God is manifesting himself through them. So if you've read Mark, Matthew, and Luke, here's this man who is manifesting Yahweh, or depends on who you want to interpret the deity is, because Gnostics didn't all agree on who the father of Jesus was. But the idea that he is God, I mean, that's like saying Dionysus is God.
Yeah, right. What happened to the Son of God? Isn't there a difference? Yeah. Like he's assuming post hoc in sort of an anachronistic way that the Trinity of the Council of Nicaea applies to the Gospels all of a sudden. Like one God, Son of God is the God Father. They're the same. That's not very clear in the Gospels.
No.
The Son of God is a separate entity as God. That's two different things in the Gospels.
You only get that in John. Like,
right. And it's
funny.
funny. In another video that I was watching, somebody sent me a video on Twitter today where Wes was criticizing Catholics, because he's a Calvinist, I think, where he was saying that Catholics who claim that they gave the world the Bible is false because it's anachronistic, and it's because the Catholic Church as an entity was not what the original first earliest Christians called themselves. But you can say the same thing about what he's doing here for Jesus calling himself God, or being literally God. You can argue that he thinks he's the Son of God, who my Father sent me, that type of stuff. He thinks he's the Son of God, but that's not the same as saying I am God. That is an anachronism of assuming that the Nicene Trinity was the exact same doctrine that the gospel writers had, which is probably false.
I don't know, like, it just trying to pretend that Jesus would have really said something like, I am the Son of God or something.
Right. We don't know if he said that.
I cannot.
The Gospels are correct.
It's very hard for me to believe he would have said something like that, though.
Right. But if the Gospels are, we only have what the Gospels say. If the Gospels are correct, you can argue that he thinks he's the Son of God. Fine. But that doesn't mean that's not the same as God.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It can mean the Son of God can be a million things. David's called the Son of God. Like,
yeah.
It could be human still.
I do think that in the context of the Gospels, we're dealing with demigod. It signals that at the beginning, which means they are divine in some way. Incarnation, maybe through baptism in Mark, but definitely by birth with the Divine Father.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the Divi versus Deus thing. How do you know it's not some sort of divinity? A divi in Roman religion is not the same as a deus, a god. You're divine. You have divine attributes, but you're not a god. This could be the sort of what the gospel writers are sort of hinting at for Jesus. That type of
Yeah,
divinity,
yeah.
that type of level of divinity is what I'm getting at.
Well, for
Kevin-
sure. It's-
Yeah. Kevin Hart says, I'm not a pilot, so I wouldn't know. Thank you guys for making learning a little fun.
Kevin.
Appreciate that.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
But yeah, so
You got another
oh
one.
wait, Tommy came back with another
Tommy's
one.
the man, Tommy, we like
With
you,
another
Tommy.
10
We
years
like
in
you.
Israel. The whole world offered me zip. I found it somewhere else. Dropped bombs. Skied 14-kilometer feet mountains. Played guitar in front of 23,000 with legends. Read every ancient manuscript. Nothing.
Have you read KTU 1101? If so, please tell me what the myth is about.
I don't know. This person sounds
I'm
like
just
they're,
teasing you, Tommy. Tommy, there's no way you read that. I'm pretty positive you haven't, but I'm being funny. No, we like you, Tommy. Please
Yeah.
feel free to super chat.
Who did you? I want to know who you toured with. Who was the legends that you
Yeah,
played?
who did you play with?
23,000. That's not a full stadium, by the way. This full stadium is like 40,000, right? Something like that. Maybe. I don't
The
know.
whole world offered me zip.
But anyways, let's keep going.
And then his disciples they think it's over. Like they're like, he's dead. We're done.
Yeah.
And then they go from 11, scared men, because Judas committed suicide. They scared men in an upper room to completely overhauling the Roman.
You notice how this is all just assuming that the Gospels are 100% correct. These are like he acts like, I don't know if you've ever read Tacitus's Annals.
Yeah.
But Tacitus's history is like a narrative. There's a lot of myth in there, legends in there, but his Annals are like strictly history. On this day, in the second year of the reign of Nero, this happened. On the third month of the reign of Trajan, this happened. Right? Well, that's not the gospel. The Gospels are not purely history. They are mythology. They are legend. There is a genre of it's got this religious genre. It's a spiritual text that's trying to draw from the Old Testament and reapply it to modern times, right? You can't read this as a history text. That's reliable information that happened. Where zombies came out of the grave when Jesus was crucified, according to one of the Gospels. Does any single source anywhere, Josephus, I don't know, whoever, Philo, anybody, what's another contemporary source?
You mentioned Philo of
Nicholas
Alexandria.
Nicholas of Damascus was in Israel during this time. Does he write anything about zombies coming out of the grave, and everyone in the world, everyone in Jerusalem saw it and was fearing for themselves? Zombies coming out. I mean, are you serious? That alone tells you this. We're not dealing with the history book here. We're dealing with legend.
Dude, I have a little documentary that we're working on right now that is all about the omniscient author of the Gospels. They know too much, and they know it so well. It is not like they're documenting actual facts. And one of the big gotchas is toward the end of Jesus's ministry, because if you ask, well, how did they know, whoever wrote this, about the conversation that happened between Jesus and Satan when he's tempted in the wilderness for 40 days? How does he know this conversation?
Stuff like that makes no sense. Stuff like that makes zero sense from a historical. You're not getting that in Tacitus's Annals.
No.
You're nothing like that. You might get that in his histories because he's trying to be a legend. He's trying to throw legends in there. He'll be like, I heard a story once that Jesus was in the wilderness. Like Tacitus would say something like that.
Right, but it doesn't even.
But the Annals, you wouldn't get. That's what I'm saying. The Annals is a history text that's meant for just documenting history.
Right. There's so many pieces of evidence, from omniscient author to eyewitness tropes. Purposefully, they invent these. This is part and parcel of the cultic environment. Literally, all we have to do is look at the Roman imperial cult, its eyewitness claims, which we'll get into some of this stuff. Ascensions, Roman roads, the whole nine, appearing after death. And then look over here at the Gospels and see how it's competing and recognize, this walks like a duck and talks like a duck. Why aren't we at least being fair and looking at these claims as well and saying, hey, this might be analogous in terms of the genre of what it's doing? That's
what I'm saying. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. He's just talking like this is all verified stuff. That's what's bothering me about this whole thing. Anyways.
Yeah.
world in only a couple hundred years because of this claim that they say they saw Jesus resurrected. Like there's something different that goes on there.
Oh,
That
here
they're
we
like,
go.
this is a miracle, right? Dead people don't usually rise from the dead.
There was quite a lot there. First, Wes says that
Before he says anything, we got to talk about this. So this is he basically says right there, this isn't normal.
Yeah.
People saw that Jesus came from the rose from the dead. They saw it. And then it's like, and I think he's going to get to it too. I think Joe's going to get to the question of, wait a minute. So you're saying 400? Well, actually, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's just keep playing this because I think there's worse things that get said that I want to talk about before we.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus was audaciously going around claiming to be God himself. I don't think that's true. Nowhere in Mark, Matthew, or Luke does Jesus actually claim to be God in his own words.
Right.
At best, it's just in John's gospel that divine claims begin
Yeah,
to
we already
appear.
brought this up.
I and the Father are one. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. Before Abraham was, ego eimi. I actually still don't think even these count, and we'll explain why in another video, but let's just say that they do. Even if this was Jesus explicitly claiming to be God, don't you think it's a bit suspicious that these claims only show up in our latest gospel? If Jesus was known to be walking around claiming explicitly to be God himself, did the other 3 gospel authors just not think this was relevant? A minor, unimportant detail not worth including? Come on. Anyway, Wes also mentioned how it was amazing that the early church grew from 11 scared disciples to overhauling the Roman world. On this, the sociologist Rodney Stark estimates that in its first 300 years, Christianity grew at a rate of 40% per decade, from a small group in the 1st century to 3 million in the 4th century. That sounds pretty impressive, until you learn that this is the same growth rate experienced by Mormonism.
Oh, this is even worse than what he's saying. It's worse, and he misses a huge major factor here. When Constantine converts to Christianity, the population of Christians is between 5 and 10%, or some even say less. So it's between 1 and 10% of the population, somewhere there. That's how many Christians you have in the whole Roman Empire in the around 325 AD, 313 or whatever, early 4th century. Not even 10% of the population is Christian. All right. Now think about this for a second. So that tells you something. Christianity didn't win because of its ideas of converting people, of how great and awesome it was. By the time you get to Theodosius in 395, they're stopping the Olympics. They stop funding temples. They close down the Eleusinian mysteries. They outlaw Mithraism. They shut down the Temple of Serapis. They basically canceled paganism. Now, this is decades after Constantine, when Christianity was only 1 to 10% of the population. So that sort of means they forced the hand a little bit. They didn't win because of how great and awesome and everyone's converting so fast. They conquered the Roman Empire. Wow. They were very, very much a small population within a bigger population of people who weren't convinced by Christianity and then got in power and then basically forced it on everybody.
Right.
That's just a fact. That's just that's a brute fact based on the fact that we know that there was less than 10% of the population was Christian all the way up into the 4th century. So they had without Theodosius, Christianity might not have been Mithraism might be the biggest religion around. Who knows? I'm just saying.
Well, I love that Alex brought up Mormonism because most people probably don't know this, but Joseph Smith ran for president. I think it was in the 1820s, mid-20s to 1830. He ran for president of the United States. Imagine if he would have won and was able to somehow cause laws to be changed in favor of Mormonism, and propagandistically they spread this across the United States. Would America be a Mormon country? Very likely it would have gone that direction, and then that would have catapulted it to the next level. But its growing rate that Alex points out is the same as Mormonism. And then he's, like, this is an interesting observation that I think needs to be made. But I love studying beyond just the New Testament claims, because if you don't know the surrounding culture,
I gotta budge in. This is crazy. I got my facts wrong. I read a paper that it was 13%. Whoa, that changes everything then.
You've been debunked.
13%? Are you kidding me? 3 more percent? That's nonsense, by the way. I
So,
just
so
that
you're
just
pretty much
bothered
telling me that
You're still-
87% of the empire
87% of the population is not Christian,
right.
and they had to force their hand still. So thank you for that's not even. I don't even know what paper you're citing, so I don't even know if that's true. Because I've read papers that said it's between 5 to 10%. So fuck
Yeah.
off with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry to
Either
cut you
way,
off.
yeah, you get the point though. Like it's
Keep talking. I gotta let my dog out real quick. I'll be right back. Just keep talking.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Keep
All right.
going. Oh, whoops. Do you want me to play a couple of more of that
Yeah,
clip
just
and then
keep playing a little.
all right. And let me play a couple more of that clip and then I'll let you talk and I'll be right back.
You're good?
its foundation in the 19th century. So if the rate of Christianity's growth is good evidence of its truth, Mormonism just became a whole lot more plausible. By the way, we actually have 11 eyewitnesses to the Mormon golden plates, whose names and written testimonies we still have today. 3 of those witnesses say that they saw the angel Moroni give Joseph Smith the plates with their own eyes. And even when they fell out with Joseph Smith and left the church, they still continued to assert that they had witnessed these events. We don't have anything like this kind of extant written testimony for the resurrection of Jesus, which we're about to get onto.
That is a great point, dude. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, what do you...
I'll be right back.
Like, that's a powerful point. Clearly, all of these eyewitnesses, and this is more contemporaneous, so we can actually fact check it better than we could some 2,000-year-old literature. But what I guess what I really like to do, because Alex is way down here into the 19th century and going into Mormonism's origins, I like to go back to contemporaneous examples to Christianity, because you can actually look around Christianity and see how other people are acting, behaving. Are there other eyewitness claims? Are there other miracles? Are there other things at the time of Christianity that we can look to and say, Christianity likely didn't influence them. It would have likely been the other way around, like the Roman imperial cult, like the Greco-Roman stories that were canonical in the Greek and Roman worlds. So if you know those things,
right,
and how universal they were, how these were what you would write when you wrote your stories, your biographies, Plutarch, these tropes, these what Richard Miller calls translation fables. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, that's another Enuma Elish and Genesis are like that. They might not be I don't think Genesis is dependent on Enuma Elish. But we were having this discussion before we went live. There's obviously it obviously knows about it,
right?
There might be there might be some sort of intermediary between them. There might be an oral tradition that came through.
Could
somebody who from the Enuma Elish gets passed down, and then eventually someone in Hebrew learns about it, and then it gets told, and then all of a sudden Genesis is kind of drawing from these same concepts. The reason, and like we find that same sort of watery chaos creation all throughout different creation epics, like the Rig Veda has this, Hesiod has this. They all seem to know about the Enuma Elish,
right?
So, but then you're like, who's copying who? Is it what's more likely, the source that goes back to 5,000 B, or not 5,000, 2,500 BC, the Enuma Elish, whatever it is, 1,700 or something like that. The one that everyone knows, or the very, very rare one that only shows up in the sources after 300 BCE that no one cites. What's more likely there? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, I get it. But even the Enuma Elish is still being written and copied at the later time. But I get your point, even though we're dealing with resurrections, specific things that I would look to Christianity and go, that looks and walks and talks and acts very much like Romulus over here, or these other kind of figures. And they had eyewitnesses who swore that they saw him ascend to heaven or appear to them on roads.
Well, even the concept of the Logos as the creative, as like this creation, the Logos as like the creative factor of God. Like the Logos is there in the beginning, and Logos is like creation manifesting and reality manifesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
In John 1. That is a concept that you find in Middle Platonic and Neo-Pythagorean circles in the 1st century.
Right.
Very common too. Philo writes about this. Philo was a Middle Platonist. So so we already know these Christians are like drawing heavily from the cultural milieu around them.
Right.
That's not like,
That's
anyways.
important though. Like the older version, and I was going through Richard Miller's book again. He's several sources: Pindar, Herodotus, Plutarch, Origen, Celsus. And I'm going to use your pronunciation. He goes into a guy named Aristeas of Proconesus, and this guy is like really old. I mean, he's mentioned in Herodotus, so it gives you an idea how old the mention of this person is. He's said to have existed, I think, somewhere around. Let me not mention because I thought it was Homer, but I could be mistaken. This is the fable, he says. So originally an epicoric legendary tale of Proconesus and Sisyphus, Perpentic Mysia. The translation fable of Aristeas was made famous by Pindar and Herodotus. The legend stated that this divine man and poet had entered a fuller's shop in Proconesus and there fell dead. The fuller then locked up his shop and went to notify the poet's relations. As the shopkeeper was out for quite some time, apparently days, with this task, a man reported to the town that as he was on the road from Artaki to Sisyphus, he had just met Aristeas, something impossible were Aristeas to have died as the fuller had reported. The fuller and Aristeas' friend and family, therefore, returned to the fuller's shop only to find the body of Aristeas missing. 7 years later, as the tale states, Aristeas appeared again in Proconesus and wrote his famous Arampspia, and again vanished. Another 240 years later, the Metapontes of Italy reported that Aristeas appeared to them as well and instructed them to build an altar to Apollo in their land and erect an adjacent statue.
Why don't we believe in these sources?
Right. They don't trust these sources. They
No,
don't
those
agree
sources
with
are no
these-
good. Right.
Yeah, until they show that this fuller died for it or something.
And you mentioned, and we also talked about this all the time, how Tacitus will say, I am not lying about this. This actually happened. He'll preface statements with that and say, Vespasian healed a blind man by spitting in his eyes. And then Vespasian in the temple of Serapis touched a lame man, and the lame man was able to walk again. I would never lie about this, he says. That's a source. That's a primary source written within decades of the incident. Why don't we believe that?
It literally says both facts are told by eyewitnesses, even now when falsehood brings no reward.
Yes.
So, like, there's no reward for this, what he's saying here.
He's basically saying, I would never lie about this, he says. Well, okay, so according to Wes Huff's criteria, the gospel say it so we should believe it. Why don't you believe in Serapis then?
Believe it.
Like, what's the difference? Seriously. Oh, one of them took over the empire. That's why. Oh,
yeah. At
so
this time,
why not Islam then? Islam took over the Western Roman Empire, Eastern Roman Empire. If we're going to go by who's conquering what, Islam's the champ then. So like your criteria is all fall apart. However you want to.
100%, bro. Look, Asclepius. People are literally, no pun intended, are sleeping on Asclepius, and of course that was part of getting the healing. As you would enter the incubator and go to sleep, and
you would get healed by it.
Not always did he appear in dreams. Listen to what Origen in Contra Celsum says in 324. And again, when it is said of Asclepius, this is the Roman version, so I'm not going to butcher pronouncing the Roman version, that a great multitude both of Greeks and barbarians acknowledge that they have frequently seen and still see no mere phantom, but Asclepius himself healing and doing good and foretelling the future. Celsus requires us to believe this and finds no fault with the believers in Jesus when we express our belief in such stories. But when we give our assent to the disciples and eyewitnesses of the miracles of Jesus, who clearly manifest the honesty of their convictions, because we see their guilelessness as far as it is possible to see the conscience revealed in writing. So interesting. Like, you can trust by reading the words, you know that they're innocent and they have no deceit in their words by their writing. So we can see that they're innocent as far as it is possible to see the conscience revealed in writing.
Right.
We are called by him a set of silly individuals. Celsus is calling them silly, although he cannot demonstrate that an incalculable number, as he asserts, of Greeks and barbarians acknowledge the existence of Asclepius. While we, if we deem this a matter of importance, can clearly show a countless multitude of Greeks and barbarians who acknowledge the existence of Jesus, and some give evidence of their having received through this faith a marvelous power by the cures which they perform,
Right.
revoking no other name over those who need their help than that of the God of all things and of Jesus, along with a mention of his history. For by these means we too have seen many persons freed from grievous calamities and from distractions of mind and madness and countless other ills, which could be cured neither by men nor devils. Well, I've got some good news if anyone's seriously wanting to look into the evidence. Asclepius was literally Christ-like, considered like an antichrist by church fathers because he was so close to Jesus in how he behaved, what he did, how he
was
healed.
especially the Levant version of Asclepius, Eshmun, who's called the oiled one. That's what Eshmun means in Syriac. The oiled basically it means he's the oil. It means oiled. Eshmun. Shmoneh is the word is the Hebrew for the eighth. So some people say because he's the eighth son of Siddiq, there might be some sort of pun there.
Right.
Either way you cut it, he's a god of healing and oils, and he dies and resurrects in his myth. So like you have an Asclepius, they call him the Asclepius of Beirut. He's a Phoenician god. Asclepius of Beirut, Eshmun. And he anoints and he heals and he resurrects people, and he himself died from castration, just like Attis, and then was risen to the heavens by the goddess Astarte and became a god and came back to earth. And that's all in the myth. And that's the Asclepius of the Levant that's influencing Hebrew-speaking, Syriac-speaking, and Eastern Greeks over there. So
Well,
yeah.
So one more thing, and then
and by the way, but the pool of Bethesda was a temple of Eshmun when they dug it up, the archaeology.
Dude, that's before you deal with Judaism. This is what's here. Real quick, they found 70 inscription or 70 miracles inscribed in the Epidaurian temple where Asclepius would mainly heal. It was the main place. They found 70 miracles that were noted, and they said there were many more. Pausanias said in his time,
tons of them.
There were so many. I want to read you one that I think is just fantastic.
Go ahead.
This one outdoes Jesus in a way.
Yeah.
Because Jesus heals blind men, but he's like, and then the guy sees what people look like trees, and then it slowly, gradually.
Yeah, anyone can look up the Epidaurus manuscripts of where you can. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of recorded primary sources of people being healed by the god Asclepius, miracle healings.
Yes. Can I read you?
Why don't Christian? Why don't we believe in it? Why not?
Yeah.
I'm being serious. I want to take it serious.
This is inscribed on the walls for people who went to the temple, so they know, right? And it says this: a man once came to the god as a supplicant, blind in one eye. Though he still had the eyelids of that eye, the socket was completely empty, with no trace of an eyeball inside. Some of the people in the sanctuary laughed at his simple-mindedness, thinking it absurd that he believed he could regain sight with nothing more than an empty socket. During his sleep, a vision of the god appeared to him. In the vision, the god prepared a drug, pulled apart the man's eyelids, and poured the drug into the empty socket. When day came, the man departed with sight in both eyes. So, and there's so many more. I screenshot them. We don't have time to get into.
But yeah,
that's
the point is there are primary sources that say things about other gods doing miracles, and under the criteria of Wes Huff, why don't we believe? Why aren't we following all this stuff? Why aren't we taking this all serious? And like he probably would say, well, those ones didn't win out. Christianity won out, even though they needed Theodosius to force that hand in 395 and ban all the other cults. They didn't do it by winning in the discussion world. They only were 10% of the population, 13 according to some guy in the chat. Even if it was 13, it's still they're not the majority. They didn't win out. So the point is, like, why aren't we taking them seriously? And if you think that because God's hand was there the whole time and made Theodosius do that, or he made Constantine convert, because I believe in everything's divine providence and everything was pre-planned, then Islam should be your religion, because Islam's growing faster and has more territory and it conquered the Romans. So I'm just saying, like, both of your criteria suck for why you think Christianity is true and all these other religions aren't. It sucks.
Just thought it was worth a mention.
It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
And I get that. But we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in
Right.
you and I, right?
Right.
Like we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And
you know?
and that to I think exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on
Yeah.
for. And you do have, I mean, you're right in terms of all of these ancient conventions.
Okay. Well, I almost feel like he needs to finish his sentence. Let him finish his
All right.
sentence because this is important.
And the ways that things were spread around. But the Gospels are written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. And they're written in this period of time where you have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things.
Okay, it gets
Okay.
a bit speculative
Pause
here.
it. I know
Scholarly
that Alex
consensus
has
is that the
something to say. Okay, dude, there's so much to Brandolini's law. It takes an order of magnitude of time and energy and effort to unravel bullshit than it does to just spout it. I can say a sentence right now and be like, I totally make up something, and it would take you time and effort and energy to like break down and actually dismantle something I claim. So him saying that they were there in the lifetime brings me to Peregrinus Nil, the story about Peregrinus dying. Lucian Samosata mentions it. I want to read that. Read it quick, and it's so good for those who don't know. He says, as I return, now Peregrinus went to the games. This is a Roman games. This is like everyone and their mom is there. And you're going to watch these games, and he's going around saying, hey, I'm going to burn to death. I'm going to commit myself to the fire because I am so philosophically advanced. Peregrinus was a Christian, for those who don't know. He left the Christians to become a Cynic. And so here's Lucian on his way home after Peregrinus finally burns himself alive, and people are asking him on the road questions about what happened, where's he at, did Peregrinus do it yet? Is he going to burn himself? Is he going to do what Heracles did? And on the way, he says, as I return, I was thinking busily, my friend, reflecting what a strange thing love of glory is, because that's what Peregrinus is doing, getting all this attention. How this passion alone is unescapable, even by those who are considered wholly admirable. Think of Jesus when he's talking, by the way, or any of the people willing to die for their belief, let alone that man who in other respects had led a life that was insane and reckless and not undeserving of the fire. Then I encountered many people coming out to see the show themselves, for they expected to find him still alive. You see, on the day before it had been given out that he would greet the rising sun, as in fact they say the Brahmins do before mounting the pyre. Well, I turned back most of them by saying, hey, the deed had already been done. Those to whom it was not in itself highly desirable to see the actual spot, anyhow, and gather up some relic of the fire. So some people still went to go pick up a char of, is this his ankle bone? This is him. And they probably have a shrine at home for Peregrinus. So in that business, I assure you, my friend, I had no end of trouble telling the story to all while they asked questions and sought exact information. Whenever I noticed a man of taste, I would tell him the facts without embellishment, as I have told you. But for the benefit of the dullards, agog to listen, I would thicken the plot a bit on my own account, saying that when the pyre was kindled and Proteus flung himself bodily in a great earthquake first took place, accompanied by a bellowing of the ground, and then a vulture flying up out of the midst of the flames went off to heaven, saying in human speech with a loud voice, I am through with the earth, to Olympus I fare. They were wonderstruck and blessed themselves with a shudder, probably doing what we would see Christians do today, the cross symbol or some of their own ritual, right? And asked me whether the vulture sped eastwards or westwards. I made them whatever reply occurred to me. On my return to the festival, I came upon a gray-haired man whose face, I assure you, inspired confidence in addition to his beard and his general air of consequence, telling all about Proteus and how since his cremation, he had beheld him in white raiment a little while ago, and had just now left him walking about cheerfully in the portico of the Seven Voices, wearing a garland of wild olive. Then on top of it all, he put the vulture, swearing he himself had seen it flying up out of the pyre, when I myself had just previously let it fly to ridicule fools and dullards. What he's saying is, I made this shit up. And this guy with a beard who's very confident just told everyone, I saw the vulture and it went to Mount Olympus. And he's like, dude, I just made this shit up. One
See?
day later, and this myth.
You want to know
this,
something crazy?
dude?
I
I
used to
know
move.
how
I used to
about it.
move the
It's like,
Ouija board. I was that guy, and
bro.
people were so into it. But yeah, no, that's crazy. That's
It's
so
crazy.
crazy. By the way, that reminds me of something before we continue, because it's cool that we're stopping, because we're not gonna hopefully get flagged like the last video. This guy, Zarmanakigis, or Zarmaris, according to Cassius Dio. He's also mentioned by Nicholas. This is how I know about it. I read Nicholas Damascus. That's one of my favorite texts. I don't know why. The life of Augustus. Anyways, this dude, I'm gonna find the source right here. It's in here somewhere. Oh, here we go. Strabo's account. Let's see if they have. Yeah, let's read Strabo's account. This dude says, according to Nicholas of Damascus, near Antioch, near Daphne, he met with ambassadors from the Indians. So, okay, let me tell you the context real quick. 8 Indian people, I think only 3 of them make it, go on a pilgrimage from India all the way to Eleusis near Athens to go and get initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, which is once a year, the greater mysteries, right? It's in the fall. And so they all travel here, and this is what happens. This is crazy. It appeared from the letter that several persons were mentioned, only 3 survived. Yeah, I was right. Whom he saw. The rest had died chiefly in consequence of the length of the journey. The letter was written in Greek upon a skin. The import of it was that Porus was the writer, that although he was sovereign of 600 kings, yet the highly esteemed the friendship of Caesar, that he was willing to allow him passage through his country in whatever part he pleased, and to assist him in any undertaking that was just. 8 naked servants with girdles round their waist and fragment with perfumes presented the gifts to Augustus, which were brought. The presents were a Hermes, a man born without arms, like a statue, whom I have seen. That's what Nicholas of Damascus says he saw it himself. He wrote this in the 1st century. Large snakes, a serpent 10 cubits in length, a river tortoise of 3 cubits, and a partridge in a pear tree. That's what it sounds like. They were accompanied by the person, it is said, who burned himself to death at Athens. This is the dude. This is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
This is the practice with persons in distress who seek to escape existing calamities, and with others in prosperous circumstances, as was the case with this man. I promise I'm making a point here.
No, I get it.
For as everything hitherto had succeeded with him, he thought it necessary to depart, lest some unexpected calamity should happen to him, by continuing to live with a smile. Therefore, naked, anointed, from the mysteries, by the way, this is the bad source. Strabo, shame on you, because there's a better source about this.
Right.
I'll tell you why. But here's what the inscription of his tomb says. Zarmanokigis, an Indian, a native of Bargosa, having immortalized himself according to the custom of his country, here lies. Now, the reason why this I don't like the source is because in Nicholas of Damascus' account, he says the reason why he killed himself is because he got initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries and was so blown away by the initiation ceremony that he no longer feared death, and it was time for him to go die.
It's so funny.
They believed in this mystery so much that they're willing to die for it.
And your point is,
that's what the Christians say, isn't it?
Huh?
Isn't that what the Christians say?
That's exactly the point.
So why don't we bring up the Eleusinian mysteries? It's just
bring up Ignatius, letter to the Romans. Ignatius. I'm going to pull it up and then share the screen, because this is dude. I've never seen anything more suicidal, to be honest with you. Ignatius.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So my point is, while you're pulling that up, my point is, this guy who traveled all the way from India, he had maybe he was suffering. I don't know what the deal is. Dio added his own little, or Strabo added some other thing because he was sick or something. I don't remember hearing that from Nicholas of Damascus, the original account. In the original account, he gets initiated into the mysteries. It was so blown away by the initiation ceremony, that he jumped into a fire and self-immolated himself.
Bingo.
He was saved by the gods. He was saved by Demeter and Dionysus. There was there's nothing else to live for.
Is there anything?
He's going to Eleusis.
Is there anything in there that you would say is Heraclean? Because that's exactly what Peregrinus in the story that is mentioned by Lucian talks about, a Heraclean kind of death.
It's not a myth. It's a story that really happened.
Well, that's exactly what happened to Peregrinus. I'm just saying.
But I don't. It doesn't. I don't think there's any Heraclean influences, because
I'll give you an example.
This guy they literally have his tombstone.
Right. So here's why I say myth. In Peregrinus, if we pull it up and show you, he mentions earthquakes. He mentions omens and portents. Like, they're being fanciful with the real death of this guy named Peregrinus. So I'm wondering if there's a mix of stuff going on with this guy's willingness to die.
I don't think so, because I think Nicholas of Damascus is giving us a real account of what happened.
Right.
I don't think there's anything fake about this guy traveling from India to give gifts to Augustus and then killed himself. That's not mythology there.
Right. Well, I think go read for the people who are in the audience, because me and Neil have been looking at this for a while. There's so many elements, earthquakes at his death, like all of this that you see at Jesus, that Peregrinus has as well. I don't want to take you through all this, but I do want to give you a synopsis here. And what this is Ignatius writing.
Yeah, just sum it up. Just sum it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's just like, list greetings, but please, guys, don't freaking help me right now. I want to be persecuted for Christ, to show you guys that I'm a true Christian. Do not save me from martyrdom, please. Pray rather that I may attain to martyrdom. Attain to martyrdom, he uses the term attain to God. He means die, right? Look at what he said. Allow me to fall a prey to the wild beast. He says, I desire to die. Dude, by death, I shall attain true life. Like, this is all Eleusinian, rehashed, recirculated, ancient material that's getting passed down that Christians are literally picking up on.
But I will say this though about Ignatius. Some people do think that was written after.
After what?
After he was dead. Like, people.
It don't matter to me. The fact.
No, I know. It's here's the thing though, because that became. You're right. The idea of dying for the god because you believe in it so much. It was that thing that was already a practice, as we point out from the Eleusinian mysteries and other places. Now, I don't know if Ignatius really wrote that or not, and he really was willing to go to his death. He might have, and that wouldn't blow me away that much, as you point out. But also, it's the idea that he would do that. Even if it was forged, that's the idea that he would do that Christians are trying to get across.
Exactly.
So, like, and I don't know if that pseudo Ignatius is one of those terms that you hear all the time. That one might be legit though, you know.
It doesn't bother me. It just shows, again, they're all kind of doing these things. And not all, but
exactly.
The earliest gospel, Mark, was written around 70 AD. This is some 40 years after Jesus died, and likely after the death of most of the eyewitnesses, given life expectancy in the ancient world. But even if it were written earlier, even if it were written by Mark himself, we're talking about the resurrection here. And notice that the earliest version of Mark's gospel does not contain any descriptions of post-resurrection appearances. It ends with the empty tomb and a disappeared Jesus, and suggests
what you and I were saying.
But it doesn't record those appearances. So even if it's written by an eyewitness, it doesn't report anything about the resurrected Jesus. The most numerous and detailed post-resurrection appearances of Jesus are in the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John. Scholarly consensus dates this to somewhere between 90 and 100 AD. Wes Huff suggests an earlier dating based on an ancient...
By the way, what was the letter that you're talking about from Ignatius? What was it called? Huh?
Which one?
Which one was it called?
To Ignatius?
Yeah.
Letter to the Romans.
Letter to the Romans? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the list of pseudo Ignatius, and I don't see it there. So that might be one of the real ones.
Fragment of the Gospel of John called P52. Here's what he says.
So you were talking about, like, what is our oldest manuscript evidence? So this guy is P52. John Ryland's 457. So that's a genuine Egyptian papyri that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript. So when we're talking about what is potentially our oldest evidence for the New Testament, this manuscript that most likely comes from Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, is the one that usually is universally accepted as our oldest one. And that contains John 18, where Jesus is on trial before Pilate. And yeah, so that's the one. It's in the John Rylands Library in Manchester, England. The reason I bring this up.
Whoa, as if that's like a historical document. No, it's not just a manuscript of the gospel itself. Like, the way he just presented this is if you know that the stuff that's written in the gospel is actually found on a manuscript of the gospel.
Yeah.
And it's second century.
Someone on Twitter.
That means it's true.
Someone on Twitter, actually, it's funny the way you say this, right? Someone on Twitter was like, "Oh, cool, dude, the spacing of the letter. Oh, look how big the fragment is." Like, and he's like, "That's cool, let's talk about the words and the meaning of the texts.
Right.
Because once you get away from what he's doing is like breaking apart what kind of papyri, what kind of is it animal skin, what kind of animal, what kind of wording, what kind of Greek, how large is the space, how big's the letter, what does the backside say? Like when you go to the actual gospels and read the material, and then you're actually able to assess this material and then compare it to other gospels, doing that kind of stuff, then you actually start realizing, is it really so woe? I mean, depends on how you look at this thing. To him, he believes this is like the truth and what happened on this literature. Whereas to us, we're like, I could get woe if I was into the nerding out of the details of the papyri and the letter size and when it was written. But when you look at the text and the claims of this text, and you're being fair to all literature out there, you cannot honestly walk away thinking.
But he talks about this manuscript as if it's, the dating of the manuscript all of a sudden like verifies the gospels. And I don't think he said it yet, but he's about to say, but now we can make John go all the way into the middle of the first century. I think he says it right here. Let's see what he says.
Stuff is because before this was discovered by C.H. Roberts in the 1940s, the convention was, because of a guy named C.H. Bauer, that the Gospel of John was 2nd century. C.H. Roberts is literally going through.
C.H. Bauer was the guy who said 175, I think. I don't know. Never mind. Forget. Let's just let him finish.
Yeah,
these piles of manuscripts in these drawers that are being like stashed away, and he finds this guy, and he sees that it's written on both sides, which is almost exclusively a Christian convention, because in the ancient world they used scrolls, and the Christians, for reasons we're not entirely clear on, they start to make codices, books, and so they write on both sides. And so he says, okay, this is written on both sides. It's probably a Christian manuscript. So he sends it off to the leading paleographers, or guys who date manuscripts, and they all say this is the beginning of the 2nd century, and so.
I don't know what he's talking about there. They all say that this is the beginning of the 2nd century. That's not true.
Yeah.
It's true that there are some scholars that try to say this is probably maybe 125. There's a few people out there that say that, not the majority, just a few. And those people get criticized heavily for that. You're crazy. That's nonsense. Most people push this to 150 to 175.
And Brent Nombury, which we've been looking at, he even says it's also likely, possibly
early third
century.
Not just him. A few people have said it might be early third. Like the 125 is crazy. First of all, the way Wes just presented this to Joe Rogan, as if this is in 100 or 110. He says the beginning. Let me replay that. He says this is the beginning of the 2nd century. Beginning. When you say beginning, you're talking first decade. I don't care who you are. That language should not be used for 25 years after. You know what I'm saying? A quarter century. You don't use that language for a quarter century later.
And so they write on both sides. And so he says, okay, this is written on both sides. It's probably a Christian manuscript. So he sends it off to the leading paleographers, or guys who date manuscripts, and they all say this is the beginning of the 2nd century. And so
the look on his face. I think I figured out when you could tell he's lying. Look at his face.
Manuscripts. And they all say this is the beginning of the 2nd century.
Right there. See his lips? Dude, you can see him do this. Whenever he knows he just pulled something over he just pulled the wool, like the sheet over your face or whatever. What's the phrase that you say? Pull the, what do they call it? Pull the,
the wool over your.
Yeah. Whenever he does that, you could see the look on his face. Is I'm gonna catch him in a lie. Hopefully I don't get called out. Look, you can see it in his face right now. Tell me that's not guilt all over it. They all said it was the beginning of the 2nd century. That never happened. That's not true.
Where did you send this to? Moody Bible Institute?
He just made that up because that's not what happened. Most people say, like I said, 150 to 175 is the early dating. And there's a few people that will go to 125 and they get criticized for it. So he says the beginning of the 2nd century. That's even if I granted that Wes is talking about the 125 dating. That's not the beginning of the 125 is not the beginning of the 2nd century. We're not right now in 2025. Is it the beginning of the 21st century?
Right.
No, we're not at the beginning of the 21st century anymore. We're a quarter century into the 21st century.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't say that. You can't use that language.
Well, he's doing it. We all know why he's doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone knows it, including the Christians in the chat, but they don't see it as deceptive. They see it as winning brownie points for Jesus. So like it's obvious the agenda is let me convert Joe Rogan. Let me
That's
get
what
Joe
it is.
to
Not
turn
even Joe
Christian.
Rogan. This is audience. They're just gonna try to get in as many zingers as possible so we can get as many people out of his audience to just siphon over to us.
Exactly.
That's what it is. And in the way he presented the evidence here, if you're gonna make this claim, fine, do it. Fine. You're gonna say, I think this is the early 2nd century document. However, I want to make it clear. A lot of scholars think this is like 150 to 175. Me personally, I think they're wrong. Here's why. Give them the nuances before you make your crazy claim.
He
That's
doesn't.
how you stay safe. When you say crazy shit, you got to give the nuances. That's all you got to do. Just let people know that you're aware of what the hell's going on here before you start making crazy claims.
Thank you. I agree.
So
there's still debate about the dating of this, but the unanimous consensus is that it's comfortably second century, potentially the beginning of the 2nd century, which means
comfortably 2nd century. So now he changed what he just said. He just went from they all said it's the beginning of the 2nd century.
He's all like two conservative
He just said
Christians.
2 different things. He just says they all said it was the beginning of the 2nd century. So now we can say this is comfortably 2nd century. 2nd century is 100 fucking years. Comfortably 2nd century could be 175 to 200. That's comfortably 2nd century.
Right.
But then he changes it up and goes possibly the beginning of the 2nd. Now he just changed everything on you. This is so dishonest.
Well, Christianity or the apologetics is always the possibility. If it's possible, it's
true.
what happened.
Right.
So if it's possible, that's what happened, man. So
exactly. It's so look, he's got this stupid face on again. The same stupid lying face again. Every time he pulls a bullshit life, does this weird thing with his lips. You can see it. I'm starting to learn the Westisms.
Dude, I just had surgery.
This is found in Egypt. John is probably writing his gospel in Ephesus. So it has to be written by John, spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript.
Wow.
Wait for his lips. Just keep going.
Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably, and potentially even like most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events.
Oh, he did it! He did it! I swear, we got to catch it. He did it. So once I figured something out about Wes. When he lies, he puckers his lips up. Ready?
The Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably, and potentially even like most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events. And so all of the literature up until that point from the scholarly consensus about the dating of the Gospel of John gets totally rewritten.
He correctly points out
I forgot to back it up.
Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably, and potentially even like most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events. And so
I lost it again. I don't know why. I tried to.
No, that was it. That was it. The
Hold on.
eyewitnesses of these events, and then he goes,
No. He puckers. Watch. It's way worse.
Find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in.
Hold on, let me go really slow so I don't miss it.
This manuscript, which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably, and potentially even
Here it is.
Like most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events.
right here.
There it is.
Yep.
Every time he lies, he does this. It's one of those like things people you could look. I had a brother who used to lie a lot, and I could tell. He's my twin brother. I knew it. I could just fucking tell. And this reminds me of that. There were certain things his face would do when he was bullshitting you. And so this is it. Look, John was possibly written in the time of the eyewitnesses And it's almost like oh my God, I just lied. I just lied. Like that's that's the expression I get when he said. Nobody says, okay, I should say nobody says. Apologists will say the Gospels are written by the people who they claim to be written by. Mark wrote Mark, Matthew wrote Matthew, Luke wrote Luke, and John wrote John. Most real actual scholars, like I hate to say the real actual, because there's a lot of Christians that are actual scholars now. You got to be careful with that. Most legitimate critical scholars do not say that these texts are written. Actually, almost all of them say we don't know who wrote these texts. Not only that, John is probably the last of all of them. Probably, look, I don't have a problem with saying John might be written around 100 or 90 or something like that. But Jesus dies around 30. Okay, he dies around 30, and he's born in 4 BCE, dies around 30. That means if his disciples were babies, let's say they were newborn babies that day. I'm just using this for the sake of argument. They were born in the year 30. By the year 90, by the year 100, they're almost 70 years old. So the eyewitnesses are not around for John. They're dead because they're not babies. They're probably in their teens. They're probably in their teens. Some of them in early 20s. They're young guys. Neoniskos, right? Neoniskoi. And no, seriously, there's probably some teens there. Probably some young teenagers there. And so by the time you get to John's gospel, way later, probably 90 to 100, they're dead. This is a new generation.
Yeah, I mean, again, we look to other accounts of eyewitnesses, and they don't count. They will not count them. And even the inventive nature of making up eyewitnesses, that was a powerful point. Even in the cult of Apollonius Satiana, Damas, who's an eyewitness to the things that Apollonius did, I mean, they don't accept these things. They're willing to grant, oh, well, those didn't happen. Or Tacitus using eyewitness tropes when he invents stuff to craft or create or give people. Because it's like, even today, dude, if I told you, bro, listen, I was just coming back from the store, a giant UFO just landed on my neighbor's house when I was driving home.
Yeah.
You'd be like, dude, you're full of shit. And then I go, listen.
Most people didn't live long. Most people didn't live that long back then either.
Yeah, I'm just making a point that if I made up something, if I added that people saw it as well, that it gives this like credibility, even if I'm bullshitting, it adds credibility to whatever you're saying. And ancient authors knew this, dude. They literally knew this when they wrote to persuade, to convince.
Of course.
Yeah, this is what they did.
Yeah, just like Paul was met up with what's his name? What's that one rabbi's name? He at the feet of Gamaliel. Like that didn't happen. But they're trying to give him credibility.
Yeah.
There's no Gamaliel and Paul. That didn't happen. Anyway.
But isn't it, don't you find it strange that in the places that there are experiences from the apostles or even by Paul or others, it's never, as Alex is going to probably, you might as well play it because Alex is going to get into some of this.
Yeah.
But notice you only get it in Luke and John, this physical, bodily, like real, tangible kind of experience described. Yeah. All the early stuff doesn't do that.
Exactly.
And so all of the literature up until that point from the scholarly consensus about the dating of the Gospel of John gets totally rewritten.
Wow.
He correctly points out that there is dispute in the dating here, but notice that while West places P52...
Whoa. That I can't believe Alex O'Connor gave him he said there's a dispute, but he was not clear on that, how big of a dispute he was being with the dispute in scholarship.
Right.
We're in different universes at this point. I'm sorry, but Alex, you should have been like, dude, he didn't give any of the nuance there. He just barely
he added a sprinkle on the cake at the very end.
He barely tells Joe, there's some disputes here, but he doesn't tell him that what I'm saying is not even close to those disputes. And
the reality is much more.
And
nuanced.
Also, he didn't tell him that those disputes are the majority of the scholars on this subject. So I'm sorry, I had to call him out for that. But anyway,
yeah, I don't blame you.
In the 2nd century,
it's comfortably 2nd century.
He pushes John's gospel itself at minimum and comfortably back into the 1st century.
Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably.
Why?
Well,
because of the time it would take after John wrote the gospel in Ephesus for it to travel to Egypt and be copied.
Written by John. spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript.
A few problems with this. First, Wes assumes that the fourth gospel really was written by John the Apostle in
Exactly.
Ephesus.
Exactly.
This is, to say the least, heavily contested by New Testament scholars. But even so,
Oh, yeah.
What has lasted 5
Heavily contested.
Yeah, no, this is. I made this. I made a tweet about this. What he's saying right now, but I'm gonna let him cook because he's going.
all that far away from Ephesus, reachable in a few weeks for an ancient traveler, maybe a bit longer. Originally, P52 was thought to date between 100 and 150 AD. Split the difference at 125. Even if this early dating...
He didn't even. I would say 150 to 175, but whatever. I don't know. Maybe he called him. Maybe he called Bart Ehrman, and Bart Ehrman gave him
Justin Martyr
the lower numbers.
But Justin Martyr talks about the logos and never quotes John.
Yeah.
That's a very odd
Right.
thing, bro.
Well, anyways, who cares?
Yeah,
is correct. That still gives us 25 years for the gospel to have
That's a
traveled
long
from
time.
Ephesus to Egypt.
That's a quarter century for things. It's not that. Doesn't it take a million years for text to get written and copied?
it takes.
It could
40 years
happen.
for a
It
legend
could
to
happen
grow.
in a year.
Yeah.
It can happen in 1 year. You can have somebody write a text. It can get copied in that library and get sent out and dispersed in 1
Well,
year.
this same logic Wes has is the same problem we saw with Peregrinus, where Lucian was saying, look, I told this story. I was bullshitting people, telling them that a phoenix or a falcon rose out of the fire. And the very next day, a guy was already saying, I was an eyewitness of it. Like,
Right,
it
but
takes 1 day for a legend
exactly.
to go
And
viral.
I want to say this, though. It is true that you should give a little cushion on when things are written for how much is going to be spread out and known to the populace. It is true. Like you sometimes you want to give a decade or so, but 25 years is a long time. We're way beyond that cushion. Way beyond that. We're double the cushion now. But yeah, you want to stay within. You want to say, like, if it's written in 90, it might take 10 years for it to get spread around the empire. You know what I'm saying? But not 25, 40, 50 years.
All of these are conjecture, though. It's all good, educated guesses, but this is the nuance. There's no confidence. You should not rest your case on this or say we have so much confidence that this goes back because this.
I can't believe that Alex gave him the whole 125 to 150 thing, because that's not what I've read about it. What I've read people say 175 sounds about right. That's what I've heard a lot of people say that to me.
I think Alex would agree. I just think he's not trying to.
He's just giving them some, like, let's go with this and let's, for the sake of argument, it seems like.
Right.
Still have been written within the 2nd century. But of course, even this dating is disputed. In 2012, Professor of Early Christianity Brent Nongbury wrote a paper in the Harvard Theological Review dispelling this very use of P52 to date the Gospel of John, called The Use and Abuse of P52.
Yes.
Here's what he says. What I have done is to show that any serious consideration of the window of possible dates for P52 must include dates in the later 2nd and early 3rd centuries. Thus, P52 cannot be used as evidence to silence other debates about the existence or non-existence of the Gospel of John in the first half of the 2nd century. The John Rylands Library itself, the library in Manchester which holds P52, says that recent research points to a date nearer to 200 AD. This would give the gospel a century to travel to Egypt.
Okay, so he redeems himself there. That's what I was hoping he would bring up. That's what I mean about the nuances in scholarship. Bring this thing way farther than everyone thinks. By the way, guess who called me bad faith today?
Who?
Apostate prophet said I was bad faith for pointing out exactly. I'm trying to point to him. For pointing out exactly what Alex here says. I said almost exactly what Alex said right now in a tweet.
Why would he say you're bad faith?
And I was bad faith because I'm supposed to assume that what Wes meant by early 2nd century is 125. I should have assumed that. He's doing apologetics for Wes Huff. I'm the one bad faith when Wes never ever once says in his video that some people date this to 175 or even 200, as Alex just pointed out. I'm bad faith.
I don't know why. Look, AP and I, we've done a lot of streams in the past, but I don't know why he would comment on that.
He's lost, dude.
Dude,
he's a Christian grifter now. That's all.
Dude, he's literally David Wood's sidekick now at this point. And I'm like, damn, dude, I thought
what a waste of career. What a waste of a career. I hope he's making good money, maybe. He's probably making great money, actually.
And still have been written in the 2nd century. But Wes Huff thinks, based on his confidence that P52 is from the 2nd century, that we can, again, at minimum and comfortably place the Gospel of John in the 1st century. Once again, as with the Isaiah scroll, I think he's just speaking way too confidently. And to be clear, I'm not claiming that John was written late. For all I know, it could have been written the day after Jesus ascended. The point is that the authorship of the Gospels is a hotly contested issue. What Wes Huff is leaving out is just how absolutely disputed almost everything he said.
That's my main criticism of Wes Huff, is he does not, as a scholar should, he puts on his scholar hat, I'm a scholar, and then he doesn't give the nuances for what he's saying.
He did this with Billy in his debate with Billy on Genesis and the Enuma Elish. Look, what's the nuance? You and me were talking about it before we streamed, Neil.
Yeah.
Is Genesis dependent on the Enuma Elish? Some scholars say, I wouldn't say dependent, but they would say it absolutely
knows about it.
It wouldn't exist without the Enuma Elish having been a mythology that was written earlier. So like, there's like scales from 1 to 10 where scholars fit in and how dependent or non-dependent it is on Enuma Elish. And some think that there's a middle version of it. Like you kind of hypothesize, you think that some later version of it, some in-between myth may have influenced the Genesis account. Either way you slice it, there's nuance. And with Billy, when Billy did do the word for word thing, what does Wes do? He like doesn't give the nuance. Any academic that's serious would be more nuanced about this and much more, cautious about how they're going to word things, in my opinion.
Right.
We talk to him all the time. So
no, then that's exactly what I mean, is he just doesn't give the nuances. He says, here's what scholars are saying, and that's always what he wants to believe. And he doesn't actually give what scholars are actually saying. He's full of shit, dude. It's like, it's really bad. It's one of the worst examples of like abusing your PhD or soon to be PhD that I've seen in a long time.
Saying is, I also want to mention here something that Wes talks about much later. There are dozens of non-canonical gospels that were written but didn't make it into the New Testament for all kinds of different reasons. Listen to what Wes Huff has to say about these.
This
so
is
these
great.
books that were not included, are any of them interesting? I mean,
they're all interesting.
But does any of it seem like it belongs in the New Testament?
Well, so part of the problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books. So you do have, and some of them have an agenda to them.
Like, what? I'm just going to underline that. He just said of the non-canonical gospels.
Part of the problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books.
The problem here is with basically the first thing that anybody learns about the New Testament. Scholars think that Mark was written first, then Matthew and Luke were written later.
Right. This is mind-blowing, what he just said. That's a problem with the Gnostic Gospels, that they're reliant on each other, which is not even true, by the way. The treatise of Seth has nothing to do with like the Apocalypse of John. Like those, there are certain texts that are Gnostic or whatever that have nothing to do with each other. They're completely in different universes. They have different gods in them sometimes. Totally different, like different cults with different beliefs. They're not dependent on each other. But in the canon world of the New Testament, of the synoptic world, they are so dependent. They have word for word the same lines in them.
Right.
So what the hell? Your own criticism could be immediately applied to your gospel, to your Bible. And now what? You just debunked your own Bible with your. He does this throughout the entire Joe Rogan episode. He'll say something and to criticize something else when it could be applied right to him.
He's again starting with, here's my orthodoxy. I have a belief. And when he says agenda, I'm already thinking like a Christian, like you and I did 10, 12 years ago. And I'm thinking, oh, those gospels have an agenda, meaning they have a different doctrine than mine. That's
right. What do you mean by agenda? Why doesn't your synoptics have an agenda?
Well, we see that. You and I can see that they have agendas because they have different doctrines as well.
It's so full of crap.
Yeah, man.
Like it's actually, I'm actually amazed by how much full of shit Wes Huff is. I can't put it any lightlier than that. I don't know how else to say it. He's come along recently, and I started watching his videos after I saw the video about me, like the Christmas one. Oh my God, the nonsense that he put in that Christmas video. Saturnalia sources are unfortunately very late. Where did you get that from? Like, that's just one example of all the crazy shit he just spews out of. I've never seen it before. This is the worst I've ever seen it before.
Yeah. I like how Alex self-defeated him by showing, like, dude, your own shit
exactly
debunks you.
We didn't even let him finish, but yeah, we already get his point though.
Why? because Matthew and Luke are reliant on Mark.
Right.
And not just a little bit. More than 90% of Mark's gospel is also in Matthew's gospel. Mark has 660 verses in total. Over 600 of them are also in Matthew, often copied verbatim. It is undisputed that there is a literary dependence between Matthew and Luke and Mark, and almost everyone agrees that it's Matthew and Luke relying on Mark. I genuinely think I must have just misunderstood Wes here, because if heavily relying on an earlier gospel is reason to suspect it, then this would completely undermine the gospels of Matthew and Luke. He also says that another problem with these non-canonical gospels is that some of them appear to have an agenda.
And some of them have an agenda to them.
But one of the most discussed topics in New Testament scholarship is the agendas of the canonical gospels.
Exactly.
Matthew's presentation of Jesus as the fulfillment of Jewish prophecy, Luke's concern for the poor and the marginalized. John's gospel seems to contain polemical material, such as strongly emphasizing that John the Baptist is not the Messiah, probably because there were people around at the time who believed that he was. So when Wes Huff says...
Part of the problem with some of these other books is they appear to be almost completely reliant on the other books. So you do have, and some of them have an agenda to them.
He's just told us that he's got a problem with the New Testament. Okay, moving on. After mentioning the Gospels, Wes goes on to talk about Paul. Whenever the Gospels were written, and by whomever, we know that Paul is the earliest source of the New Testament, dating squarely from the middle of the 1st century. And we think that he actually did write at least 7 of the letters attributed to him. And so it's to him that we now turn.
How do
So,
you fact check someone coming back from the dead?
well,
How many people saw his body, right?
Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion.
No, saw the resurrected
resurrection.
Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Wes gets this slightly wrong, as Paul actually says that Jesus appeared to 500, not 400 people at one time. But this only makes it all the more amazing. 500.
That's nuts. Well, I think talk about here. I gotta fix my camera. But did you hear what just happened?
Yeah, he got look.
So
this happens
he
all
just
the time.
he's talking about the 500 thing.
Yes. We
So
don't know
Wes-
who, when, where. We don't have any evidence of any of these people. Again, I know that Alex is going to take this into the many people witnessed the miracle of the sun or Mary apparitions, things like this. And I talked to Richard C. Miller before this, and I might as well read this. Actually, these are private messages between me and Miller, but I love this dude. I'll write him, and he'll just be like unleashing primary source after primary source. We had a talk, and I was like, listen, how do I merge Richard C. Miller's scholarship with the consensus views of trying to see this as like, is it hallucination? Are they having visions? What's going on? And how do we make sense of that? Most scholars who don't believe the New Testament and the claims of actual resurrection of Jesus will say, nah, someone misperceived or had a vision or was hallucinating and saw Jesus, and therefore he, was alive. Well, what Richard C. Miller points out, and most scholars are not classicist trained. He studied the Roman imperial cult. He's read the Greco-Roman material, and he points out how there are eyewitness traditions way back. I'm talking 500-600. We talked about what's his name, Proconesus.
Aristeas.
Yeah, Aristeas of Proconesus. And there's so many, by the way. It's not just them. It's contemporary with Augustus and Julius Caesar being seen as a comet. So I thought, okay, what if the Roman imperial cult, here you have Augustus, Octavian, looking up, sees a natural phenomena, a comet. There's Julius. He's heading off to Mount Olympus. He's becoming a god. So here's a natural phenomena. And I'm thinking, what if Christians are on this hill in Galilee? They're looking up at the sun or some natural phenomena, and they end up going, oh, it's Jesus. He's alive again, kind of like we see with Julius Caesar. And I wondered if there's a way to marry those two ideas with a purposeful eyewitness tradition that would start a cult, just like the Roman imperial cult was started with this kind of propaganda. And they had eyewitnesses that came forward saying they saw the Caesars on Roman roads. Right. This has got to sink in.
Well, here's the thing. The thing that's so crazy about this, though, is he doesn't even get the number right in Paul's epistle.
Yeah.
It's 500 eyewitnesses.
We don't know who they are.
You are the expert. You're not even getting the source right. You're saying 400. He repeats himself, so it wasn't just an error. He doesn't even know the source. Then Joe, I think it's gonna come up. I don't know if Alex I haven't watched the whole Alex video yet. Let me see if Alex includes this part so I can talk about it. Let's just continue.
100 people witnessing the physically resurrected Jesus would be an amazing proof of his resurrection. Unfortunately, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 is the only mention we have of this event anywhere. Right. It's not in the Gospels, nor in Acts, nor in any other.
Okay. Oh, you couldn't see it?
No.
Okay. So let's play.
A historical source. So what do we learn about this event from 1 Corinthians? Nothing. Nothing at all.
Right.
Paul does write that, quote, he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, but that's it. We're not told who these people are, or why they were gathered, or when this occurred, or
Right.
how Paul learned about it, or how he knows the number of
Okay.
people involved.
This is the point that I was just going to say too. I'm glad he brought this up. Joe Rogan, sort of wisely, off the knee-jerk reaction, very rightfully asked him, "Oh, really? 400, huh?" Even though it's 500. Even Wes doesn't even know his own sources. Anyways, 400. Whoa! Out of those 400, do we have any any journals left, or like anyone writing any? Do we know who those 400 are?
Yeah.
What do you think Wes says? What do you think Wes says in response to the answer? 0, by the way.
Right. We don't have
0
anything of
because Paul says first he went to the apostles, then to 400. So it's not the apostles. These are 400 extra people, right?
Right.
What does Wes say in response? He goes, "Yes, Joe." He goes to Peter, Paul, Mary, Luke, Matthew, John. He starts naming apostles from the Bible.
Right.
As if those are the guys who signed, "We are the 400 people of the eyewitnesses of Christ." That did not happen. It was the answer is 0, Wes. You should have told Joe 0. We don't know who any of the 500 people are.
Right.
Oh my God, I can't even get over it. It's so you shouldn't be allowed to have a PhD if you're saying stuff like this.
Paul himself wasn't there. Is this just something that he heard about? From whom? When? We're not told anything about this extraordinary event. And also, even if Jesus did appear to 500 people, how many of them actually believed what they saw? Again, we're not told. Maybe there was an appearance, but only some of them believed it. Remember, Matthew's gospel tells us that even when Jesus appeared right in front of his 11 disciples, some of them doubted. They lived with Jesus, and he was standing right in front of them, but they didn't believe. Many people ask me, why would the disciples have believed in the risen Christ if they didn't actually see him? In response, I point to this verse in Matthew and ask the reverse. How could the disciples have seen him and then not believed? With the 500, we're not told.
And that's a good point, because we don't even know what the circumstances were. Was it a vision that they all had? Was it a dream? Were they all? We don't know if it was physical. We don't know that. Paul doesn't give us any details, and you think you would. This is a fucking crazy event.
Listen to what Richard Miller says. Justin and Arnobius both argue that the Christians had done the same thing as the Romans by manufacturing eyewitnesses. We know from Dio and others that Roman apotheosis eyewitnesses were paid even. This was all part of emperor post-mortem consecration.
Right.
Seneca described a few named individuals who were often relied upon to provide these sworn testimonies. This understanding, I think, only becomes unpalatable because folks have vested considerable public reputation in prior explanations, visions, ghosts, apparitions, dissonance, etc. I am sure if one were to ask a devotee or priest at an Augustan temple, if Augustus had a demigod birth or had ascended to heaven, they would say, "That is our belief." And he puts it in quotes.
Exactly.
That, however, would be the cultic pious answer for that devotional context, not a claim to ontological fact, but rather an expression of cultic veneration and devotion. I love him. He's
it's a good point, because and what's their? It's funny because we started this off talking about how he was really pressing Billy Carson about his methodology. What's your methodology, bro? Wes, what's your methodology here for the 500 eyewitnesses? Because it says it in a text. Well, what's the difference between that and the fucking Enuma Elish or the Gospel of Philip?
Or Apollonius of Tyana, or Roman imperial cult, or Vespasian healing the blind.
Right, but I'm saying the stuff that Billy was citing, those are forgeries. Those don't count. What's your methodology for Paul's letter? How do you know this isn't made up? The point is,
you know damn well that he would think the other 7, really Hebrews doesn't really count, but the church would say there were 14 counting Hebrews early on. The 13 total, right? The other 6 that are forged that aren't really Paul, he probably would argue for their authenticity. He seems like the kind of
he would find
Christian,
the one scholar out there that agrees with him and cite that guy.
And he'll probably go with, these are all authentic.
Yeah.
Right.
According to Dr. So-and-such from St. Mark's University, he says these are authentic. Of course he does. That's what they would do.
Yep.
How many of them believed that they saw Jesus? If some of the disciples doubted that it was him, why would we trust an unnamed mass of strangers mentioned briefly in one source by a man who wasn't there but heard that they'd seen him? And even if all of the 500 people did believe that it was Jesus, how would Paul know this? Even if he was there, which he wasn't, Did he interview them? Was there a show of hands for anyone who doubted?
That's another fucking point. I'm getting like heated up over this.
No,
Because
you're
it's
good.
really crazy that this is taken seriously this day. Paul wasn't even there.
Nope.
So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a secondary source talking about people who we don't even know, who have unnamed people. It's not even a secondary source. It's a third-hand source, because it's a second-hand source on people who we don't know, who are saying they were something at an event that could have happened or could not have happened. And there's another weird thing about this is the 500 witnesses doesn't come up in any other early epistles.
This is
that's like me saying I was flying for 6 hours. I was flying. It was amazing. And then like I write a journal 10 years later, and I just completely and I even go over that date. And that same day I did this, I went to the store and I forget to write down that I was flying. Like, where is the other sources on this?
Robert Price actually was one of the few guys who've ever brought this to my attention, and he was right about at least considering the idea that 1 Corinthians 15 was added later, because the Gospels not once mentioned this many eyewitnesses at once supposedly seeing Jesus. And he's like, it's like pretending that Mark knew about birth narratives and just ignored it. If he'd have known a divine birth story, it's unlikely he wouldn't have included it in his gospel. The fact that there wasn't one already floating around,
or even just in other epistles that are floating around too,
right?
You know, like you would think Paul would mention this a few times throughout, and that day, and on that great day when the 500 witnesses saw this, you would think this would be all over the place, being heavily talked about all over the place, but it's just barely even touched on. And then there's no context, and then it just goes on to the next stupid subject about faith.
Like, I do like what Alex is saying here, though. Like you said, how does he know this? Where did Paul learn about 500 seen him? Is it hearsay? And if it is, what about the story of Theseus, who led his army after he's dead? He appears to an army and leads them into battle, and they all saw him on the battlefield. What about Asclepius too? Yeah. He led a war and helped his people against the Spartans. Oh, guess who it was? It was Philip of Macedon. He led them against the Spartans.
Yeah, and then you have a Seleucus in 310, 311 BCE says that Alexander the Great visited him in a dream and told him that the empire should be his. And he used that to his advantage to get people to rally behind him. You also have the wife of Pompey in Lucan's Pharsalia text. Pompey the Great, after he dies, comes back and talks to her. And he's like, oh, don't go to that battle, or don't go to this place, or something bad's going to happen. So she gets a little more. So this is normal shit back then for people to be visited by having visions and visited by gods, people who already died. Not even just gods, people. I just mentioned two people that were mortals. That were Alexander and Pompey. They're not those aren't gods. They're people that came back from the dead.
Exactly.
So why is Jesus special for that? I don't know. Anyways.
Before the crowd dispersed, there was no easy way even for Paul to know what these people believed, which makes it impossible for us to know what they believed. And even if the
misinterpretations, great comment, by the way. She had a cool video. She's mentioning some of my Dionysus stuff with IP. She says, and the army that followed the risen Nero.
Right.
Nero Redivivus. There were so many imposters who pretended to be Nero. People believed that he was still alive. And
Sibylline oracles, man. Sibylline oracles. And then Christianity plays off that in Revelation. That's how connected Revelation is to the Sibylline oracles, that you're using that Nero return thing. It's in there.
Exactly.
Anyways.
500 people did all believe it was Jesus. How many of them were already predisposed to think this? Remember, sometimes groups do claim to see visions, such as various apparitions of Mary, or the Roman Emperor Constantine's vision of a cross of light in the sky, which may have been seen by his whole army as well. The source isn't clear. Look at this image. This is a picture of a crowd in Fatima, Portugal in 1917. This crowd, many more than 500 in number, were witness to the so-called miracle of the sun. A prophecy by 3 shepherd children said that the Virgin Mary would perform a miracle on the 13th of October, causing this large crowd to gather on that day. And the miracle happened. Testimonies from the members in the crowd were published in the newspaper. They claimed to have seen the sun dancing in the sky, zigzagging around, and even advancing towards the earth, all for 10 minutes. So a large crowd witnessing a prophesied miracle, and we actually know who saw it and precisely what they saw. We even have their direct testimony. Does Wes Huff believe in this Catholic miracle? Do you? And if not, Why not? But
Right.
Alex, how do you explain this then? If it didn't
Good
actually happen,
question.
why would there even be this rumor of 500 people seeing Jesus? Well, I'm glad you asked. I want to share an idea that I learned from the Christian biblical scholar Dale Allison in his glorious
Oh
book
shit.
on the resurrection of Jesus. Think about this for a moment. How could, quote,
That's
more
our
than
that's our
500
buddy
people
Dale.
all see the man Jesus, quote, at one time? That's a pretty large group of people. How closely could they have examined him? How could they all have got a good view at one time? Imagine a celebrity like Justin Bieber being surrounded by 500 people in the street. How well would you be able to make him out? Could you even be certain that it was him? Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's take a look at what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, but in the original Greek in which Paul was writing. Here's Paul talking about the appearances. He appeared to Cephas, that's Peter, and then to the 12, then he appeared to the 500. But notice that in between the words appeared and 500, we have this word, excuse my pronunciation, epano. This word is typically translated here as more than. Hence, Jesus appeared to more than 500 brothers. But let's investigate this word epano. Every other time it appears
It's Epano, but whatever.
in the New
Yeah,
Testament,
yeah,
it's
yeah. You gotta
translated
do that.
differently. The word epano means not more than, but over or above or upon. The only place in the whole New Testament where this word is translated to mean more than is, you guessed it, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. That's why, by the way, interestingly, if you look at the King James
Whoa, that's a good point. I remember hearing that from. I think it was from Dale actually, but that didn't go into my toolbox. I'm gonna start bringing this up more often. It's the only place where this translation is used for that word.
version of this verse, you'll read the following. After that, he was seen of above 500 brethren at once. Above. It's interesting, right? So looking at the Greek, it seems plausible that Jesus did not appear to more than 500 people, but rather he appeared above 500 people. Yes, above.
That
You see what-
changes everything, though.
If you interpret it that way,
Well, why
right?
wouldn't we?
Well, I'm saying if you interpret it the way he's describing it, as if they're seeing likely the sun or something,
But here's the thing, and wow, that's another point too, the sun thing.
it's above.
But here's another thing about that, and that's a really good point too. What you just said, it could have been some sort of sun miracle, because if that word is only used for above, and then all of a sudden there's one place they want to make it over 500, I think he has a point here. I think
Like, how do we use
why
that
should
Greek-
we rent? Why should we just assume it's this one time they're using it this way? Great point, by the way. This is a good video.
what I'm getting at. It was a vision in the sky, just like the sun miracle above Fatima or the cross of light above Constantine's army. It happened above the crowd. Now, of course, that word, epano, does appear here before a number, 500. So it could well mean over or above 500, as in more than 500. But then again, in Luke chapter 19, during the parable of the 10 minas, Jesus has a man say to one of his servants, take charge of 10 cities, and to his other servant, you take charge of 5 cities. If you read the English Standard Version, the translation is, you shall have authority over 10 cities, or you are to be over 5 cities. Why? Well, because the word there
Epano.
is, you guessed it, epano, over. So even in front of a number, this can still mean over rather than more than. And even without this linguistic evidence, what do you think is the most likely explanation for a group of 500 people all seeing Jesus at one time, especially considering Paul's own conversion on the road to Damascus? Christians say that this involved him meeting the risen Christ, but Acts tells us that he simply saw a flash of light and heard a voice.
Right.
That was it. That was the nature of Paul's meeting with Jesus, a flash of light. Was the appearance to the 500 of a similar form? We simply do not know. Whatever we believe about this strange verse, it's hardly evidence enough to balance the resurrection upon. Here are the words of Dale Allison on this appearance to the 500 in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It is little more than a tease, a tantalizing hint about something that, barring the discovery of a new source, will forever provoke questions without answers, or at least answers without robust support. It is important to emphasize this because many Christians continue to appeal to the appearance to the 500 as though it carries great apologetical weight. Yet we really know nothing about this ostensibly stupendous event. We have only a brief assertion from someone who was not there that it happened, and we cannot name a single individual who was involved. Okay, what's next?
Paul
Yeah.
says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once. I mean, if we read the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Luke and Acts, so same author wrote these both documents. He says that Jesus was walking around teaching them for 40 days after he was resurrected from the dead. And so these are written within a time period when you have people who would have seen Jesus's ministry, who were there, say, at something like the feeding of the 5,000, who could have been able to verify or debunk some of these
God.
things that are being said.
Again, Wes appears to be assuming a radically early date for the Gospel of Luke's composition. Most scholars suggest an earlier date of between 80 and 90 AD.
It's going to shut this stream down if you don't, probably.
No, I think we're good. I think it's just Joe Rogan.
I don't know. I just want to make sure. But
You can react to videos. You're supposed to be able to do that.
you should. But there's
Yeah.
so much there too that we could
Well,
comment
yeah,
on.
go ahead. What do you want to say?
Yeah. So with what he just said pertaining to spending 40 days and then like he's like accepting everything at face value. In Luke, at the end of Luke, there's no 40 days. It's only
Right.
at the beginning of Acts. It says he ascends at the end of Luke. Let me pull up Luke here. So this is what's interesting, I find. Let me see. Is it Luke 20? What is the last chapter of Luke?
Yeah, and I think now that the Apano thing makes it more, and it makes more sense, because if Paul is only like barely talking about it, then it probably was some sort of celestial event.
Yeah.
Because if it was really a physical Jesus talking to a crowd of 500 people, there's no way that just gets talked about for one split second and then never again.
No.
But if it's some kind of cool celestial event that happened in the sky, like a meteor or something, I don't know, then yeah, you would barely talk about it.
So I just shared the screen just to show them the text here that I have. And it's the Jesus appears to the disciples, right? He opens their minds. They're all doubting too, continuing that Matthew doubting tradition, which you also find in John with Thomas. Touch me, feel me. Now you know. Blessed are those who don't, right?
Yeah.
So now you get down here. You are witnesses of these things. I am going to send you to what my Father has promised, but stay in the city until you have clothed with power from on high. When he had led them out of the vicinity of Bethany, he lifted up his hands and blessed them. While he was blessing them, he left them and was taken up into heaven. This is, by the way, if you don't know this is all the same day of the resurrection. This is the end of Luke chapter 24. When you get in Acts chapter 1, he's there for 40 days. So even the ending of Luke to the beginning of Acts 1, you have a discrepancy about how long Jesus is around teaching people and all of this. But the other part is in Luke, the road to Emmaus story. One of the sources I wanted to read to you was Seneca the Younger satirical work, the Apocalypsintosis, the Pontification of Claudius. It's a big word.
Yeah. It's a satire.
This is the quote. Who has ever demanded eyewitnesses from a historian? If there were, nevertheless, a necessity to produce a witness, then ask the man who saw Drusilla going into heaven. The same fellow will say that he had seen Claudius traveling on the road with crippled steps. Whether he wants to or not, it is necessary for him to see everything that is translated into heaven.
Mm-hmm.
He is the watchman of the Appian Way, along which you know that divine Augustus and Tiberius Caesar went unto the gods. So there were Roman road experiences where people were seeing the Caesars on roads.
Exactly. The roads is a big one.
The road to Emmaus, where two disciples see him. You see hospitality myth, theophany myth, but then the road to Damascus, which acts as literally doing the same thing.
And this was a common trope that roads and crossroads were a place where, supernatural things would happen. So
exactly,
that's a common trope.
Yep.
Part because of its literary dependence on Mark's gospel. But even if Luke was earlier than this,
is he talking about Joseph? Okay, good.
And besides,
I'm going to skip ahead.
Optimistic. We're going to jump forward a bit here now. Wes is arguing that Jesus definitely died on the cross, which I think I agree with. But he then says this:
atheist, agnostic, Christian scholars, they will say if we can know anything about Jesus, like they'll cast it down on a lot.
Oh, here we go. This is a good part.
Gospels in terms of the actual historical Jesus of Nazareth. They'll say one thing we can be sure of is that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. Because
now, no, they don't say it like that though. They don't say we can be sure of it. They can say the most likely that Jesus probably lived and was crucified by Pilate. Though using language that we can be sure and certain that this happened is not what scholars use.
Certain scholars that do say those words.
Well, that's not very.
But oftentimes when they're quoted, like when Bart says it, it's because he's reacting to mythicists he's arguing with.
Yeah, I get that.
And so it's
probably very likely. I think it happened, obviously.
Yeah,
but to say that about anything historical is like very not. That's not professional for a scholar to say.
No. You gotta be cautious.
For anything in history, we can be certain that this happened.
But notice it's all these like he's building up. It's the same.
Yeah,
dude. You would look at me as an apologist shill if I did this for Dionysus or if I did this for Islam or any other. Like Christians call out Muslims for this all the time. Like it's
Now I will say this. I want to make sure everyone's clear. I'm not saying that he's wrong and the scholars don't think this happened, but it's just the language he's using is he's really trying to like make it seem like that this is like some fact, and it's like no, it's not really a fact. There are disputes there. We don't know if it happened Maybe it didn't happen in Passover. Maybe it happened somewhere else. Maybe he got stoned to death. Maybe he there's
Right.
some other things that could have happened.
Right.
I'm not saying those are likely, but it's not certain that this all happened. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
Because we have not just multiple attested documents that we refer to as the New Testament, but Roman and Greek and Jewish writers refer to that claim afterwards.
Yeah. All of them living a century later, almost
Right.
a whole entire century later. So Pliny the Younger would be the first. Oh, okay, let's talk about Josephus real quick. Josephus is known by most scholars. He would never bring this up to Joe Rogan. Is mostly forgery, or at the very least, it's heavily interpolated.
Exactly.
And so I think more and more scholars are coming out and saying, I don't even know if I even think it's real at all.
Right.
But Josephus probably didn't even mention Jesus. That's possible now. That's on the table now. It wasn't on the table 10 years ago.
Right. Because there's
Now it
two
is.
quotes, two
Yeah.
spots.
Yeah, exactly. But so then let's go beyond that. Who else do we got? Tacitus, Suetonius, and Pliny the Younger, and then Celsus is after that. Celsus might be like 150 or something, 140. Maybe actually Celsus might even be between 120s, because according to Origen, he lived in the time of Hadrian, or wrote in the time of Hadrian, which is between 117 and 135. Anyways, he'd be the last of the four anyway.
Yeah.
Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, all of them are writing around late 110s, early 120s. That's almost a century later, and this is all post Gospels anyway. This is all post Gospels. The Gospels are floating around, and Christianity is starting to get its cults everywhere. So they're just reporting on what they hear. So this isn't the way West presented this data. Is that these are records that the Romans were keeping in Jerusalem that are preserved to this day that prove that this happened.
Right. Another way of wording what you said, for those who might misconstrue, you're not saying that he wasn't crucified by Pontius Pilate in the 30s. You're saying all of these extra biblical sources that we get could potentially just be going off the hearsay of Christians, of what Christians are saying about their guy.
Right.
They don't have a primary source as far as any evidence where Josephus or Tacitus or them.
Yeah,
are
they're
saying,
not.
Hey, we have this
record.
source. Huh?
Yeah, this isn't like a record that was kept in Jerusalem.
Right.
Found that dates the time of Pontius Pilate. That's the way he's presenting it, basically.
Exactly.
And talk about the fact that you have this guy, and it's mocked within earliest Christianity.
Hmm.
So one of our earliest, in fact, not one of, the earliest depiction of Jesus on the cross is called the Alexamenos Graffito. And it's...
We don't even know if it's the earliest anymore. It might be. There are some debate. Some people are pushing it back to the 3rd century now. I was reading on the arguments of why they thought that, and I think it's weak. I think it is a legitimate 2nd century inscription, the Alexamenos Graffiti. But anyways, let's hear what he says.
probably from the end of the 1st century. And
No.
it's a...
That's not true. No one says that anymore. Alexamenos Graffiti is not 1st century. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you're talking about the horse, the donkey
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, no, that's not. No one says that. Well, let's see what he says.
an individual with their arms raised in an act of worship, worshiping a man with a donkey's head who's being crucified.
Wow.
And right beside it, it says Alexamenos worships his god in Greek.
Whoa.
And it's mocking.
The Alexamenos Graffito is really cool, and indeed perhaps the earliest surviving depiction of Jesus. I think the so-called magical gemstone in the British Library is tied for this spot. West says that it's, quote, probably from the end of the 1st
See,
century.
here we go.
And it's probably
Told
from
you.
the end of the 1st century.
But again, dating it is difficult, and most experts date it to the late 2nd or 3rd century.
Yeah, exactly. I
Some
told
think it
you.
could be earlier.
I'm telling you, it's probably one of the oldest, because the oldest inscriptions, the oldest images of Jesus are 3rd century and later. So it might be the oldest still, but it's not 1st century. It's like 200 AD.
Right.
It's like early 3rd century, late 2nd century.
And I
At
mean,
the
all
earliest.
you're saying is like Christians are telling their story. This is how people know about Jesus. And clearly there's the teaching that he got crucified by Pontius Pilate. So it's not like you would need historical accuracy at this point of what really happened originally when
How
there's
is that?
already stories circulating. But what I find ironic is here's the guy who also is not really giving you the nuance about other groups who thought Jesus himself wasn't crucified, but someone in his stead. Like interesting discrepancies in those early narratives. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, look, I just pulled up the Wikipedia for just so I can show you. I knew like here is this is classic Wes doing what he does the best, presenting the data to Joe completely skewed to one side and not giving the actual scholarly take on this stuff. So this is here it is again. Look, let's see. Here's a source from chicago.edu. Let me see if this is a peer-reviewed paper. Yes, some sort of paper on this written by somebody. Anyways, I don't know. Palatine Museum. Here we go. Rodney Decker, Leximanos Graffiti, says, often said to be the earliest depiction of Jesus, the graffiti is difficult to date, but has been estimated to be made around the year 200. So where the fuck does Wes get off by telling Joe probably first century? What is he talking about? He's just look at dating. No clear consensus has been reached about when the image was made. Dates ranging from the 1st century to the late 3rd century have been suggested. Within the beginning of the 3rd century, thought to be most likely.
So he doesn't even say, look,
David Balk.
It's most people date it here, but I date it here. If he said that,
one person, he probably found one person that said it's 1st century, and now he's running with it. This is what he does. This is what he always does. He doesn't tell Joe that most scholars think early 3rd century. He doesn't tell Joe that it's hard to date this thing and it ranges from 1st to 3rd, but I think it's 1st, but here's why I think it's 1st. He doesn't do that. He just tells Joe this is probably 1st century. Yep. In fact, I want people to hear his language again now that they know what happened. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, and Nanology's right. Huff is their new savior. Lots of Christians in chats. Debate Huff.
Dude, I will. He doesn't want to debate me.
There's so many people, like it's cringe to see how
I don't even read the comment stuff.
How delusional they are about it.
Yeah.
In fact, not one of. The earliest depiction of Jesus on the cross is called the Aleximanos Graffito. And it's probably from the end of the 1st century. And it's a
you hear that?
It depicts an individual with
it's probably from the end of the 1st century.
Yeah, that means most likely. Probably
really, bro? That's how you're gonna tell Joe. That's how you're gonna present the scholarly data to Joe. You're just gonna tell him that? It's so full of shit, dude.
Arms raised in an act of worship, worshiping a man with a donkey's head who's being crucified. Whoa. And right beside it, it says Aleximanos worships his God in Greek.
Whoa.
And it's
the Aleximanos Graffito is really cool. And indeed, perhaps
I'm surprised Joe never heard about this yet. I thought Joe would know this.
Everything, here's like a methodology we could use for Wes. If everything Wes says, you take like this, he says it's 1st century, it's likely 2nd or 3rd. Like everything he says,
give him a grading curve. That's how you deal with Wes Huff.
You literally now know what I'm saying. You could go, oh, he says early 1st century, most likely into 1st century or 2nd century. Everything dates, everything.
I forgot to check if he does the thing with his lips here.
Multiple attested documents that we.
All right, ready?
Yeah,
we're gonna find out right now.
Let's see if he puckers up. Everybody
referred to as the New Testament, but
he did it. Right
Roman there. And Greek and Jewish writers refer to probably from the end of the 1st century.
There it is. There it is. There is the nervous lip pucker after he says every time he makes something up or throws in a thing that he knows isn't necessarily true, some sort of white lie he throws in there.
Yeah,
he always does that with his face.
That's so funny, dude.
Weird. Anyways, let's continue. I caught him again, dude.
You got it.
And it's it depicts an individual with their arms raised in an act of worship, worshiping a man with a donkey's head who's being crucified.
In particular, it's later Christian tradition which associates those names, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, with the Gospels. I'm not saying that Wes claimed that the Gospels do identify their own authors, by the way. I just think it might have been unclear for somebody listening, so just pointing it out. But some people, and I don't know if Wes is one of them, do think that John's Gospel does identify its author, does tell us who wrote it. But he doesn't do this by saying, my name's John and I wrote this Gospel. Instead, throughout the Gospel, a disciple is mentioned, who's only ever identified as the one whom Jesus loved. Here's an example from John chapter 19, the crucifixion of Jesus. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, the disciple took her into his home. So the beloved disciple is quite an important figure, seemingly the person who looks after Mary, the mother of God, after Jesus dies. Later in that same chapter, the text says, "The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe." And it looks implied here that the man being spoken about is the beloved disciple, who's mentioned just a moment earlier. In John chapter 21, Jesus is talking about the beloved disciple, and then the text says, "This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true." He's the one that wrote them down. Now, the beloved disciple is often identified with John, the son of Zebedee, that is, the Apostle John. And since we're told here that it's him who wrote it all down, John is the author of this gospel. That is why some people claim that John's gospel identifies its author. But there are a few problems with this. First, the beloved disciple is never explicitly named as John. Nobody knows who it is. He's mentioned 6 times in total, only in the Gospel of John, but is never named. Some people think that it might be Lazarus, for example. Some people even think that it might be Mary Magdalene, but I think that's a bit tenuous. But suppose we just knew that the beloved disciple is John.
I skipped over
Fine.
way too far.
Still,
ahead.
notice that the 4th Gospel only ever speaks about the beloved disciple in the...
We got his point there, but I skipped way too far ahead. I just want to. This is the last part anyway. So.
Okay.
And 400 people saw him afterwards.
That's the claim that Paul makes.
Paul makes this.
Yeah.
And how many different people
again. You see it?
have some sort of
Dude,
a recollection or
it's
writing
so
or
obvious.
something that's attributed to them?
Watch this.
Sort of a recollection or
Oops.
writing or something that's attributed to them. And how many different people?
This is the part that I really wanted to get
400
to.
people saw him afterwards.
All right, watch this. Watch this. He does it. This is the last time I'm going to do this, but you got to see this.
That's the claim that Paul makes.
Paul makes this.
Yeah.
There it is.
And how many different
He does that weird shit with his lips, and every time he lies.
Have some sort of a
Anyways.
recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection.
So this is what I was talking about earlier. Joe wisely asks him, "Oh, well, you just said 400 people witnessed the risen Jesus. How many of those 400 actually write something down?" Let's see what he says.
Well, you have
Come on.
What is up, everybody?
Peter, Paul, Jude, James, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Okay, let's break this down. Wes just mentioned 7...
He just starts listing off characters from the Bible as if that's how you I don't fucking know. Peter, Paul, Luke, James, Matthew, Mary Magdalene, Martha. Why not? The dog was there. I don't fucking know. I'm just going to start naming people because I don't know who these 400 people are.
So imagine where he's at on the platform he's on. If he'd have just gave an honest answer to that question.
Yeah.
And he
Zero.
went, we
The
don't
honest
have
answer
any
is
of them.
0.
We have none of them. But we
Right.
do have him in the same passage. See, notice the nuance. You could easily go, yeah, but in the same passage, he mentions the 12.
Let's do
he
this.
mentions me.
You're Wes Huff. You believe in Christianity, but you want to give the most scholarly. Let's do this right now. I'm Joe Rogan.
Okay.
So 400 witnesses. Now, I'm wondering, do we have anything that they left behind? Anything like journals or anything?
Nothing. The only thing we have is the relayed message that Paul seems to convey, that there were these witnesses, but we don't have anything of them. But in the same passage, Paul seems to indicate that there were 12. There were other people that were personally close to Jesus in his own life that we get described in the Gospels. And they were witnesses according to the tradition that is found in 1 Corinthians 15 and also in the Gospels. So, yeah.
Oh, so
But
you're
there is
saying
but
we
if you're
don't know
asking
for
about
sure who the 400 are. Yeah. But you're
Yeah.
saying that out of that 400, it's most likely.
We don't know who the 400, when the 400, how the 400, anything about the 400. We just know that 400 supposedly witnessed him. But we do have a list in the same section that describes these 12 and this, and Paul being the last one, unworthy, but called by God, witnessed the resurrected Lord, or vision, if you will, of the Lord. Now that, of course, gets disputed because they'll probably argue physical. But yeah, you see how we roll.
Let's watch one more time how he plays this.
Sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them. And 400 people saw him afterwards.
That's the claim that Paul makes.
Paul makes this.
Yeah.
And
there's a lip
how many different people have some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection?
Well, you have Peter, Paul, Jude, James, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Okay, let's break this
I
down.
don't know why that's so
Wes just
funny to
mentioned
me.
7 names.
It's so funny to me.
Yeah.
He's asking about these 400 people. He goes, "Oh, well, we have Peter, Paul, Luke, James, and Martha, and Mary Magdalene, and Peter, and John, and James of Zebedee, and the brothers, and the twins, and Thomas," and just start listing off you.
Yeah,
from the
because
gospel.
you know what Joe meant. Joe was saying how
Right.
many of those witnesses.
Who are those 400 people? That's what he's
Right.
saying. He
How
didn't
many of
ask who are
them?
the apostles.
And-
What are the names of the apostles?
Yeah, yeah. But instead, he seems to just have conflated it rather than explaining that nuance. But
Yeah, I want to hear his response to this because he's a pretty sharp guy.
names, including some gospel authors. We'll start with the non-gospel sources.
Peter, Paul, Jude, James.
Peter, Paul, Jude, and James. Remember, we're looking for people who wrote about witnessing the resurrection. Although,
Right.
interestingly, Rogan actually only asked about who has been attributed as writing about witnessing the resurrection, not necessarily who actually did write about it.
Or something that's attributed to them.
But even then, there are problems. So first is Peter. There are 2 epistles in the New Testament attributed to this apostle.
Right.
First and second.
Why didn't Peter talk about the 500? He was there, right? Peter was there, according to Wes Huff, but he doesn't mention 500 people or 400 people, whatever the
no,
hell.
he doesn't.
Peter. Importantly, most scholars do not think
Right.
that Peter actually wrote both of these texts, especially Second Peter, which is
Right.
one of the most disputed texts in the New Testament. They're still early texts, but probably not both written by Peter. At least one of them is likely a forgery. There are scholars who defend the Petrine authorship of both epistles, of course, but the consensus is against them. Second is Paul. There are 13 epistles in the New Testament attributed to Paul, but many of these are also believed not to have actually been written by him. The consensus is that 7 of them are undisputedly his, whereas the rest are contested. Some, like 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, are firmly believed to be pseudonymous, written by somebody else. But even if Paul wrote all of these letters, remember what we're looking for here. Remember what Rogan asked.
Some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection.
Paul never claims to have encountered the physically resurrected Jesus. Even his conversion story in Acts just describes him seeing a flash of light and hearing the voice of Christ while on the road to Damascus. He never even claimed to meet the risen Jesus in the flesh, which I think is what Rogan is looking for here.
Right.
Our third name is Jude. There's one short epistle in the New Testament which claims to be written by Jude, the brother of James. James being James, the brother of Jesus. Surprise, surprise, this is highly disputed. But whatever the case, it doesn't actually matter, because the real problem is this. Jude's epistle doesn't even mention the resurrection.
Right.
It's not in there. So Wes is wrong, even just to say that a written witness to the resurrection has been attributed
Exactly. This is so
to Jude,
nonsense.
let alone actually written by him. Rogan is looking here for accounts of the resurrection written by those who witnessed it. Jude simply doesn't count, even if he did write that epistle, because he simply doesn't write about the resurrection in it. And there's a similar problem with the 4th name that Wes mentions, James, whose epistle in the New Testament, again with some dispute over the authorship, also simply does not recount his witness to the resurrection. Wes is wrong to bring him up as well. So
He just destroyed him.
I mean, everything's disputed, dude. Everything is so not confidence like they want to pretend.
That's not
it
a
is.
video that Wes wanted to get as a consequence for his Joe Rogan episode. Now he's got that floating around the internet. And he's got my video floating around the internet. Dude, his bullshit is bringing himself some negative karma. So he might be gaining all these new followers, all these dumbass followers that are, but he's getting some negative attention. And that that video from Alex O'Connor he destroyed him in that one.
Oh, no doubt.
That's there forever.
I think you and me are going to need to pick apart a few moments here and actually address them formally and have some time to prepare with some notes and stuff. Because there's so much we could add to what Alex said that isn't mentioned by Alex, by sources that help vindicate our point, by some of the nonsense that Wes said. I even found someone sent me a link and I went to it and found some YouTube channel, Christian follower. You could tell they're just diehard apologists for Wes. And they were talking about how my comment section turned on me or something under my video where I'm critiquing Wes with you. It's the one that you're critiquing him on Christmas as well. And my comment section didn't turn on me. It drew in so many of these honestly Wesites, that are like just Wes is right. Wes is true. If you catch yourself,
he's a messiah,
dude. It is for real. They are absolute apologists for an apologist. That's all I can say.
It's wild, man. It's wild.
And you showed how he was wrong. Then what happened? Steven came in, said how he admitted he was wrong, and there's still people
They're
commenting
still
on
like,
the video.
you won't debate him. You won't debate him.
Or
But we
Wes wasn't
will.
wrong. You guys
Right.
were wrong.
I
They
know. It's
still
like they
say
didn't
it.
even watch the video. They just
They didn't watch the
commented.
video.
All right, it's nuts.
Yeah.
I'll do some super chats, and I think we've been streaming for a while, so I know you're sore over there. So
Oh, I'm
let's get
hurting,
these.
bro. I had surgery.
Yeah. Tommy Radcliffe has another super chat. Says Loggins, Cross, Lukather, Walsh, Springfield. Now, met them all. Got signed. Everything, all the time. Left Hollywood to fly. Became a studio cat.
Damn.
Impressive. Can't lie. That's very impressive. 10 times 10 to God over Evo. Math/physics. Masters to fly at Pan Am. Adaption, yes. Not evolution. Period.
Adaptation.
For 2 + 2 is 4. There is a God. That was good. That was good.
We already
Those are good
knew
supers.
Tommy was doing this from the
Yeah.
get-go, bro.
Adam with the 20. Thank you very much, Adam. That was a really, really, really generous super chat. Appreciate that. Paul, a Pharisee Jew that converted himself to Hellenistic Jew, Greek. Alexander the Great so happened to have sexual relations with men and women, but he was born of a virgin. I don't think he was born of a virgin. It does say his birth was miraculous.
So
Olympias.
I could pull up Resurrection and Reception if you want me to.
It doesn't say virgin though. It might be
No,
she might be a virgin. We don't really know if she had any children before Alexander.
It doesn't explicitly say that, but it does tell her husband, Philip, not to have sex with her
Right.
while she's pregnant until the seal has broken and the child is born, which is the divine child.
But she's also impregnated by the snake. So
Right.
there is kind of a sexual union.
Yeah.
But anyways. But I don't understand the question really. So let's see. Paul, a Pharisee Jew that converted to Helen, Alexander the Great, so happened to have, and he was born of a virgin. What do you think about that?
Alexander the Great, again, I the first part, I don't think I mean, unless you want to say when he converted from Pharisee, from being this Pharisee, he then learned these Greek ideas. I don't know how to pin this guy down. And I think he's always been Hellenized. I think he's always been a Hellenistic Jew.
Yeah.
Even if he was a Pharisee, I think he was a Hellenistic Jew who may have been a Pharisee. Even in later rabbinic sources, they say that some Jews were trained in Greek and some were trained in Hebrew, and that there were two schools of thought, and that was okay. That was something that they did. Paul may have been a Greek school of Pharisee, for all we know. We just don't have this idea that Pharisee must mean only Hebrew and only know this and not know Greek. Or
well, actually, according to Josephus, the Pharisees are the more Hellenized. They're the more Hellenized group. The Sadducees are the ones who are less Hellenized.
But again, just the second part of the question, Alexander the Great, he is born through divine, it's not a sexual union in Plutarch. So it's a divine birth that is not through sexual union, from what I understand. It's Apollo. Yes, there's snake symbolism, but it doesn't mention sexual union, from what I understand. And it also uses, if it's the same account, it might be Plato, but I think it uses dynamos and pneuma for the spirit and power of the god impregnating the mother. Yeah, but exactly. I know that there were magi at his birth, just like Jesus. So
right. Yeah, that's another thing that you see with Mithridates the Great had that too.
Yep.
Misinterpretations. Thanks you for the $9.99. Says, I worked at Delta Airlines for a while. Now I know Hebrew. Thanks a lot for the wow. That's impressive. That's awesome.
Yeah, Delta. I think the Delta for the D. When I mentioned this earlier, I imagine that's where the Delta airline, but I could be wrong. Thank you for the super chat.
Yes, appreciate that. And then we have Adam S. again, says Paul was a Pharisee, the most religiously conservative group of Jews in his time. I would say the Sadducees were more conservative. They were Torah straight up, nothing else. No extra text, just the Torah. That's how the Sadducees are described by Josephus, as they're just Torah observant, and they just work in the temple, really. They're a temple going Jews. They're like, they don't care about the world at all. They're just, anyways. Pharisees were known for strictly following Jewish laws. I think he's got it wrong. By the way, it's not his fault though, because you'll talk to people today, and they'll say like Tobias Singer thinks that the Pharisees were the strictly Jewish customs ones. We want to know why? Because the Pharisees survived and the Sadducees didn't. So the Pharisees sort of rewrote their history and said, we were always the Torah observant ones. But then you actually look at the primary sources and you're like, no, the Pharisees are the ones that were following Hellenization and stuff. And the Sadducees are the ones who died out. They were the so I think he's got it backwards here. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
What do you think, though?
Again, you're dealing with a mixed bag of different people. Like what kind of Jew was Hillel?
Hillel was a Pharisee.
Right. And
Yeah.
then his competitor was also a Pharisee.
Yeah.
But his competitor, from what I understand, was much more strict.
Well, Hillel the Elder was very, very much worldly and liberal.
Right.
In his,
Very, very progressive, if you
Yeah.
will, less strict.
He was not a Sadducee.
Huh?
He wasn't a Sadducee. He was just a
Yeah.
Pharisee.
So I'm just saying, like, in the school of thought, it's like saying Presbyterians, are they extremely conservative or liberal? Well, if you go to the PCA Reformed version, dude, they're like Puritan 2.0. Like music, they don't play in church. They read from the Westminster Confession of Faith. I was in it. They literally sing hymns and don't have music, depending on the church you go to, of course. And then you go to the liberal form, and like you have LGBTQ pastors, like, and they're totally open to it. You don't even have to be a Christian to go to church and to take communion and to be part of the church as a member. Like, there's two radical versions of Presbyterians. I imagine Pharisees were a mixed bag, is my point.
Yeah. Anyways, I thank you for that super chat.
That's
Franklin's and Diamond says, Dwayne Rhino Johnson, every time they call Jesus the Son of God, he corrects them and says he's the Son of Man. That's another point about Mark, too. He says he denies all this stuff. That's another thing that you don't hear Wes bringing up. How much he denied being God, right? Or even the Son of God.
Well, I need to go double check all the sources where they are.
At least the God thing, where he goes, what does God say to do? Oh, follow the laws. And like, he doesn't say follow me or anything. Like, there's parts in Mark where he denies being God. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I don't know if he's never claiming to be God.
Right.
He's a son of a God. He
which is very different.
But he is divine.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Like, I think anyone who's trying to read Mark as if Jesus himself is not divine is missing what's going on, I think, in the gospel materials, because there is a divine nature to Jesus here. I think that if he isn't divine,
it's definitely hinting at this guy's special and divine, and you can't get around that. There are people who try to go so far into the skeptic side to try to say, like, he's just a man, he's just the Messiah. It's like, no, he's divine. He's divine.
He's clearly,
not the one and only God the Father, being one with God the Father. That's a later transitional Trinitarian thing. But that's not. You can almost make that argument from John. You can get there from John. It's not that John's explicitly saying there's a Trinity and you better believe in a Trinity, but there are elements in John 1, for example, that there is a triune aspect of God. If you read it in the Greek with Logos and Zoe, that I can say confidently. I don't care what Unitarian scholars disagree, because the Valentinians wouldn't exist if that wasn't the case. The Valentinians are relying on John, and their texts say that there's a triad between Logos, and Zoe and God. And then you find later on at the Council of Nicaea, in the text of the transcript of the Council of Nicaea, what does Bishop Arius say to try to refute Trinitarianism? He calls them all Valentinians. So that's all the evidence you need that Trinitarianism is early doctrine. It's just not. It's just the Nicene Trinitarianism develops.
Mm-hmm.
But people who say that the Trinity just came out of nowhere in the late 3rd century, that's not true. There is pretty early on Trinitarian or triad like Christianities, and the Valentinians are one of them. And it's from John. So anyways, let's see. Thanks for the super chat. Lev Polyakov, thank you. Oh shit, Lev, I just read over your name like I didn't know you. Break the rules. What's going on, dude? Love me some Gnostic and Myth Vision. BTR with Neil and Survive the Drive coming out soon. Yes, that is very, very soon. That was a good recording. By the way, how come that stream you just did is still up despite the copyright? I actually went into my I went into my studio and disputed. I broke Fair Use Act, hit enter, and it's up again.
It is?
So, yep, it's up again.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
That is nuts, dude.
Because it's protected by law. You should be able to respond to videos.
Yeah, of course. You would imagine.
So yeah, it's up. So thanks for that super chat. Platots says Brent Nongbree has an article on his website addressing Wes's claims. There's a bunch of people online right now on different websites and vlogs and videos and X posts addressing Wes's claims because it was so there was so much bullshit in that podcast. It was so full of crap that it was just natural that the internet was going to respond that way.
Yeah.
I don't know what he thought. You can't go on a Joe Rogan and spew nonsense and not get pushback. That's going to happen, especially if you're the one claiming to be this scholarly. Oh, he started off the whole episode about talking about methodology and how it's really important to really follow good methodology and be make sure you're strict with your guidelines and you follow the scholarship. That's how they started off the podcast. Remember, Joe Rogan was like, "Yeah, man, it's really hard to be self-taught these days. Scholars are really, it's really important that we." And all of a sudden, after that, they just go off the deep end and just say whatever he wants.
Yeah, that was pretty rough.
So
it was rough. If we ever had an opportunity to go on with Joe, it will be very nuanced, but we'll also give him so much interesting shit that Wes will never bring up. I mean, there's just it will never get discussed.
Exactly. Thanks for
I don't know a single guest that he would ever have on that would discuss some of this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't people out there, but Joe brought it up. He's like, I don't know many experts that go this deep. Like this is like to the back of the back. And if Wes is your standard,
right? That's why I couldn't believe he kept saying that to him. I'm like, dude, this guy's throwing out, if not worse, misinformation than Billy was on your show. If you think Billy was like, they're all criticizing Billy as making up stuff about tax or the aliens and Enuma Elish, whatever. Zechariah, he's going with the Zechariah Sitchin. He's got a scholar to go off, Zechariah Sitchin.
Right.
Just like Wes has apologist. There's no difference. To me, there's no difference there.
Yeah.
Just one's following Zechariah Sitchin, the other was following bullshitters that are apologists. Sorry, I don't care if you have a PhD.
And truth be told, after talking, I wish Wes would have had communication. We could have talked, but obviously we're not part of that agenda. But speaking to Billy, which I did talk to Billy, the dude's actually a very nice guy. Like he's hopefully you and I can get a recording in where we can actually have this chat with him, because I think he's actually a very nice guy. We're going to disagree at the end of the day. Our conclusions we don't have the same conclusions, but we can find things, I think, in common. And those are the things I think Wes did not nuance in the discussion and acted like they weren't there to try and make the Bible true. His whole goal of that debate, and he says it during the stream, is pretty much the truth of Christianity, the truth of his religion, his Bible. And that is pretty much what his whole goal was. Defend the Bible.
Exactly. Platon. Oh, by the way, I forgot to read this one. Thanks for keeping my mind alive. Well, appreciate you for leaving the super chat. Platots, once again with the super chat, says Wes under Nogbris article actually says he agrees that the things he said cannot be used to date P52. Well, why didn't he tell Joe that? It's worth reading his. Why didn't he tell Joe that in front of millions of people? When an article that 50 people are going to read, then he tells the truth there. See, that's what I can't stand about some of these people.
Hey, ask where is Wes's response? Do you have a website in particular where this is at? Is this on his academia page?
Yeah, I'd like to see where that link is. Please give me if you have a link, drop that, please.
Is it on Brent?
I want to address that when we do our recording.
BrentNumbree.com. P52 on Joe Rogan Fact Check. So you could scroll down underneath. Wes says, so hi, Dr. Numbree. Wes here, the person who appears on Rogan. Let me share my screen so you can actually see what I'm looking at. Let's look at this here. So,
can you make it bigger?
There we go. You got your super chat up. All right, let me zoom in just so people can actually
see. Go way in. Way. Keep going.
All right.
Two more.
Two more?
Yeah.
Here, that's good. That's good. Wes here, the person who appears on Rogan. I don't disagree with your assessment, and maybe efficiently tried to hedge my bets a number of times in the conversation about dating, especially mentioning the date is contested. I wasn't implying at all that Roberts was the one that discovered it in Egypt, but discovered it at the JRL. That in Roberts' day, it questioned the consensus, but that while a 2nd century date is more or less the agreement now, but there certainly are good reasons to think otherwise, as your work is fine testament too. I was also using Oxyrhynchus more as a catch-all term, but once again, take your point about that note. This particular moment was over the 2.5 hour mark into a long form, no notes, non-linear conversation where many topics were discussed. Rogan wanted to talk about sports and cosmology as well. Not that it is an excuse for getting details wrong, but I hope the grace of slight brain fog taking place can be factored in. All that to say, I do appreciate you taking the time to communicate where and why being clear on these things is important. Hi, Wes. Thanks for your comment. Non-linear conversation. Yes, I don't envy you having to shift basically mid-sentence from early Christian papyri to, hey, what do you think about the Voynich manuscript? If my comments in the post seem a little less than charitable, that arises from my frustration with the overall presentation of P52 as a kind of paradigm-shifting artifact. It can't bear this weight, and in fact, there is no need for it to do so for the argument you were making. There are, of course, good reasons for rejecting
this?
Huh?
Who's saying this right now?
This is Brent Numbry, literally
responding to Wes.
This is literally like within the past, I don't know, few days probably.
What is he? He's responding to Wes's claim, though, right?
Yeah, he's literally rejecting what he's fighting back what Wes was saying and why. He's saying like why we're tired of people using P52 as some paradigm shifting artifact. Like, and he's arguing against it, and he says, so he says Bauer's ideas about John, and there are sound arguments for dating the gospel according to John in the 1st century, just as there are some reasonable arguments for placing it in the 2nd century. But to me, anyway, bringing in P52 as a kind of seal the deal demonstration of a 1st century date isn't really helpful because the fragment itself isn't securely dated. I've tried to present the evidence about this as clearly as possible in my publications, and so it's little disheartening for me to continue to encounter the P52 as proof story again and again, which is exactly what he did on Joe Rogan.
Right.
He literally was like, P52 is early 2nd century. That means we could safely put John in the 1st century. Like,
it's nonsense. We got to bring. So this will be good to bring up when we do our video.
Yeah.
We show this on the screen, and people can get a glimpse of what other scholars are saying to Wes. He's getting slaughtered right now on the internet for his Joe Rogan. You know what? Someone like Wes, he has like you could tell he's got like a very privileged, self-centered kind of mindset. You could tell he thinks he's like the main character type. He's one of those people who thinks he's something special about him. You could just tell. He's got that personality where he's like, well, I'm the scholar here, so let me tell you guys. Like, he has this fucking weird, fake plastic Ken doll personality, right? I would tell you right now that all the people slaughtering him right now, I guarantee you, he thinks I'm taking up my cross. Lord, look at me. I'm taking all this heat for you. Don't you love it? Even it's like you're lying. You're making shit up. That's not an instrument for God. That's an instrument for someone who wants their worldview to be dominant.
Yeah,
because it doesn't have the strength on its own. That's what that means. So
thank you for bringing that to our attention, Super Chat.
Yeah, we're definitely going to use that. I appreciate that. By the way, Cross Bible is in the house. He says, I forgive your use of Bible Gateway. We didn't use Bible Gateway. We were watching someone else use Bible Gateway.
I pulled up Bible Gateway.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. That's a sin. I forgot that's a sin on Gnostic format and Myth Vision.
But Apano in 1 Corinthians almost certainly, certainly means more than, not above in a spatial sense. But my response to that would, how do we know it's a spatial sense? Doesn't that beg the question? Isn't that begging the question? Why are we assuming it's a spatial sense? Right? So if we pull up Perseus Tufts, I'm not saying he's wrong. Stephen knows more than me. Stephen's way better at Greek than I am. This is how me and Stephen always are. I'll give him my all and try to refute what he's saying until he convinces me otherwise. And then I just go, oh, okay, you're right. This is what I'm doing one of those here. Apano, if you look at Apano, above, it's used in Herodotus. It's used in Plato's Phaedrus. Let's see if we can get some Let's see if we can get some examples here. Let's see, what is Plato's Phaedrus here?
In Genesis.
Plato's
2nd
Phaedrus.
but
Here we
what
go.
that comes from.
Let me see. I clicked on Plato's Phaedrus, but for some reason it didn't take you guys with me. Plato's Phaedrus this is how he uses for the word above. This is translated as above. Feebleness, never been reached by the surface of the sea, and should never have seen, by rising and lifting his head out of the sea into the upper world, and should never have heard from anyone else how much pure and fair it is in the world he lived. I believe this is the case with us, for we dwell in a hollow of the earth and think we dwell on its upper surface. I wonder if that's where the word above is, the above surface.
Or upper world, upper surface.
Yeah, so I don't know. Wouldn't that be spatial too? I'm just saying. I don't know. I think we need to look into this a little bit. But I would assume that you're right before I assume my own self is right. Or I would assume you're right before. Well, I guess it was Dale Ellison Jr.'s argument, not necessarily Alex's argument. But I don't know if Dale Ellison's a Greek expert at all. So I don't know. I guess I would assume that Stephen knows what he's saying here because he speaks Greek. But I would check into this before I just go, okay. Because I think there might be something to it. And the reason why I'm saying that, not because I want it to be the way I want it to be, is because all of a sudden Paul makes sense if this is above. Because it doesn't seem like it sounds like a celestial event, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, he's third heaven, constantly talking about, I knew a man who went to the third heaven. There's always these appearances, like these heavenly or visionary types of experiences that are described coming from the sky, it seems. But then again, I don't know. I'd be curious to see what Stephen is saying. You know,
I want to look in. What I want to do is at some point when I'm not going live, I want to look into every time that word apano is used, in what context, and if what Stephen says is true, then I think we have to abandon ship here. But it's a good super chat. Thank you for that. Jason Kakulo says the Essenes were the most Torah observant. No, but they were Torah observant. They weren't not Torah observant. Not the most though.
Yeah,
the Essenes were writing according to Josephus. Like, look, we don't have a lot of sources on the Essenes. We don't know. We can't we don't have sources from the Essenes saying what they do on a daily basis. Josephus says that the Essenes are known for prophecy and apocalyptic stuff, and taking Old Testament. Well, he doesn't say Old Testament, but he says taking scripture and repurposing it for modern times, which is like Christianity does. So that's what the Essenes are known for, according to Josephus. Not in Antiquities, in the Jewish War, he says that. Anyways, does that mean that they're the most Torah observant? No. The Sadducees are known for being only Torah observant and nothing else. That they would never start a rabbinical. They would never start a Torah, a Talmud thing. That's a Pharisee thing. The Pharisees were more Platonic, which makes sense that they would start the Talmud because the Platonists are always debating, arguing back and forth, dialectic. So that's what I would say. I would say the Essenes are this third group that are more about apocalyptic prophecy. The Sadducees are Torah observant, temple loving, and the Pharisees are Hellenized, the Hellenized type of Platonic Jewish person. That's what I would say. But Pharisees are also high priests too, not just the Sadducees. Pharisees are also high priests. Anyways, I was making fun of Tommy. Just kidding. Funny. That's funny.
That was with the Delta flying because he was saying, I flew across.
Oh, yeah. I know. I got that. Knowledge. He's back. Knowledge of Greek in the West had already declined by the end of the 4th century. Yeah. I didn't even get to talk about that, so I don't know what you're responding to. I was talking about that with the thing about this. So he's talking about Wes making the claim that nobody spoke Greek anymore. This is what Wes says in the Joe Rogan video. Stop. In the Joe Rogan video, Wes Huff says nobody spoke Greek anymore, so Jerome had to write a Bible in Latin. That's false. Not for 3 reasons, actually. I was going to say 2 reasons. 3 reasons. He never specifies the Western Roman Empire. If I was to steel man him, which is what Apostate Prophet tried to do, of course he's talking about the Western Roman Empire. Dude, what are you talking about? Well, no, the Western Roman Empire nobody speaks Greek anymore is still false, even if it was just the Western Roman Empire. You can say Jerome wrote the Bible in Latin because Greek was declining in the West. That would make more sense. I don't even think that's the case, though. I think Jerome wrote the Latin Bible because the capital was moved to the East and they were trying to bring Latin to the East. That's what I think, and it failed. Now, Greek never officially dies the way Wes Huff made it seem like until after 476, when the Goths take over the Western Roman Empire. But in the East, Greek survives all the way until modern day. It's always there. The Greek's always there. All the way through the fall of Constantinople in 1452, Greek is the major language in the East. So when Wes tells Joe Rogan, oh, Jerome had to write a new Bible in Latin because nobody spoke Greek anymore, it's one of those like Westisms that are like the full picture's not there, and it's coming off as just like uninformed. Like it almost sounds like he thought that Greek was declining. It's very Western centric. Like he thinks like what's happening in Rome is what's happening all the way in the whole Roman Empire. So people are probably watching going, what is he talking about? We didn't get to that part yet because I got kicked off. But we will address that in your video, I think. So when we talk about West again in your video, we'll talk about that.
Subscribe to Cross Bible. It's our friend Stephen Nelson, in case anyone's wondering.
Absolutely. Subscribe to Cross Bible. There's some good stuff on there. Some really good stuff on there. Here we go. I knew he was going to respond to this. Above in the heaven, epano and tois uranois. Why is there two accents on uranois? Oh no, it's uranois. Uranois. My bad. I didn't see that right. All right, so above in the heaven would be the spatial sense, right? Above the 500 brothers, epanuton pentakosion, adaphon. That's unlikely. You spelled aldaphone wrong. You're missing a lambda in there. Anyways, that's probably just a text. That's probably just a typo on him because he's probably typing fast.
Maybe it's also limited on character. So
Maybe that's a good point.
It might be one character away from actually being. But because I know that those $5 supers, man, you got to punch every little thing.
Above the 500s, above in the heaven would be the spatial sense. Above the 500 brothers, that's unlikely. Okay, I'll have to look into that. I think you're probably right. Thanks for that, though. By the way, go subscribe to Cross Bible for sure. Dunda Miffin says, when are Gnostic myth fishing going on Rogan? Good question. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Joe Rogan isn't. He might not ever have me. Might not ever happen. Who knows? Joe Rogan is Joe Rogan.
Pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
It'd be sweet though. It'd be sweet. I would love it.
I mentioned that on Twitter. I was like, dude, like, get me on. The reason I'm frustrated is it's like you're sitting there watching.
You want to give you want to give them the other side of this scholarship.
He needs to have the other side. This is not fair for him. Like, he's so impressed. And listen, we can get impressed. I'm impressed with this stuff. I'm impressed with mythology as well. But like, it's much deeper than that. And there's much more than that. In fact, I feel like so many people would actually have a better sense of realizing Christianity and its place in the Greco-Roman world, the broader world, after an episode with me and you talking about it and explaining, if you're going to grant it, you need to also grant these and explain these other cults and stuff like that. So then the real question just becomes, why did this one win favor and the others didn't? And then that's a different question. It's not a miraculous claim. You can study it. You can observe it. You can actually see how it worked. But I'd love to get on Rogan and talk about all this stuff, man.
For sure. For sure. And then a big super at the end. Ooh. Souza's HVAC. Mark Souza. Thank you for the super chat. Let's see what this question is. What do you think of Margaret Barker's take on the gospel writers returning to a first temple theology where Jesus claims to be Yahweh and the Father that he refers to is El, the blessed Most High? That would allow Jesus to be God and Son of God. That's a very interesting take. I've never read that before.
Yeah.
I've never that's funny because then all of a sudden the Old Testament matches with the New Testament more. Now you can sort of unify the usage of El and Yahweh in the Old Testament and sort of make it all fit. That's interesting.
I'm very cautious about.
And also on the cross,
This-
he says Eloi, Eloi. He's calling God El in the the New Testament.
Yeah,
Eloi means my
I'm
God.
very cautious with Barker's position on some things. Even the way that she'll interpret some of the stuff with Daniel pertaining to the New Testament. And I can't remember off the top of my head. I did an interview with John J. Collins on this. That doesn't mean she doesn't have some good things to offer, probably. But
I
when
think
you're
it's a
talking about
creative
First
approach.
Temple, is this an idealized perspective of the First Temple? Because what do we mean by First Temple? And like,
I don't think they would know what First Temple was. They wouldn't.
Yeah, that's
know.
what I'm saying.
That we had to find out through archaeology what was this early Yahwism thing like, and we don't even know if Yahweh was ever the son of El. That's more of Baal and El. Like that's Ugaritic sources. You get Baal and El. Baal's the
There
son
may
of
be
El.
indications though, like
There might be some places in the south where Yahweh was the son of El.
Deuteronomy 32 might
exactly.
imply him getting an inheritance from Yahweh as if he's a father to
yeah. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying it's not as much, but it's possible. And I think it's possible that they thought of it that way. You know, who knows? There could have been people reading scripture in the first century and going, why is sometimes it's Yahweh and sometimes it's Yah? People who can read Hebrew, because the Septuagint just renders it all as the Lord, Kurios. But some of these people might know Hebrew, and the people who know Hebrew might be telling their fellow Greeks, hey, sometimes it's Yahweh, sometimes it's El. Maybe Jesus is this Yahweh character and the God. It's not. All I'm saying is it's not out of the question.
Right.
The sources are there for them to do it, but we just don't know. We just don't. We don't have like a commentary by some church father that says.
Yeah, I just don't know where and how we can know what First Temple theology is. Other than
I think he's just backtracking on where the actual time was when El and Yahweh would be father and son.
I think Margaret Barker tries to argue that we can know what First Temple theology is and stuff. That's why I'm like, maybe they're looking at these texts and they're going, let's have an idealized form. Let's go back to this thing. But I don't see that in the New Testament. It doesn't seem like it's trying to go back to that. It's going to a celestial Platonic thing. It doesn't seem like it's going to a First Temple. It seems more like it's going to a otherly worldly temple. Like, and then it depends on what gospel too, because you are the temple. Like, there's so many spiritualizing things going on that I don't know how we'd be going backwards. Instead, I would say Platonic philosophy's influence. I have a lot of questions about Margaret Barker's work. That's all.
Yeah. Anyways, so thank you for that super chat. Last one says Daniel Whitaker says, I thank you for the $10, by the way. I see Christianity beginning in Hellenic Turkey, not Israel. All those churches Paul wrote to were there or Rome. Prior to becoming Paul, Saul's job was to harass and chase heretics out of Israel. Absolutely. So I wouldn't just say just in Hellenic Turkey, which was Asia Minor at this time. Asia Minor, Phrygia, Cappadocia, Pontus, Paphlagonia, that region. Cilicia, where Paul was actually from there. Paul's from Tarsus. He's from Asia Minor. Mm-hmm. That's Cilicia. Now, you're absolutely right that's where the 7 churches of Asia are in Revelation. That's where the big hot spots are. That's where Pliny the Younger encounters Christians for the first time. The evidence shows Christianity is thriving there first before anywhere else, but also Alexandria. And also Paul is writing to Macedonia. Thessalonica is in Macedonia. Corinth is in Greece, so it's Greece, Macedonia, Asia Minor, and Alexandria, and then Antioch, Syria.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, everything you said,
but he's right about not Israel, though.
I would go a little bit further and say Paul says to remember the poor in Jerusalem, and he claims that the earliest ones prior to him, the apostles that were before him, are in Jerusalem. So the question I have is, if Christianity, unless you want to say Paul's version of Christianity, okay, But if a form of Christ followers existed prior to Paul, they were in Jerusalem. Before,
I agree with that. I think
Yeah.
that at that point they're just a sect of Judaism still, or a
Right,
sect of Jewish
right.
people still. And I think once it gets to Asia Minor, that's when it becomes Christianity. That's when it becomes Greek.
right.
Once it gets out of Jerusalem is when it becomes Christianity. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, what is Christianity? Is it belief that this cult that's around a dude that died and rose again? If that's the case, and it has all these mystery qualities that we have in Paul, are we to pretend that Paul's version of this is so radically different from those in Jerusalem? Dude, we don't have enough evidence. This is the problem that Westites need to swallow, okay?
Yeah.
We just don't have your religion is a faith thing. Accept that. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I'm not talking to Daniel. I'm talking to Westites, right? Like it is, we just don't have what we wish we did. If we had more evidence, we'd be able to have really conclusive arguments and like solid cases. What apologetic does is it's a sleight of hand. It's a magic trick that says we have all the confidence and all the evidence we need, and we have all the answers to those problems. Here you go, believe. And it's like, no, dude, the more you look into it, the more you research, the more you realize that's bullshit. And it's much messier, much more nuanced, and much more fun than what apologetics does, in my opinion. This is fun what you and me do now. We love doing this. We love exploring the ancient world and thinking, could it be this? Oh, it could be that. Could it be earlier? Could be later. Yeah. Could it have borrowed from here? Yeah. Could have. Well, the reason why we could do that is because we just don't have absolute evidence, proof, if you will, of any of this stuff. And we're not going to try and BS people into thinking, oh, this is the case. But we want to bring up evidence that is comparable, that's analogous, that allows people to go, hold on, why don't I accept Apollonius of Tyana as my fucking savior? Oh, I know why I don't accept him as my savior. Because I've already been indoctrinated.
I didn't grow up in it, right?
I
didn't grow up in that one. That's why. Exactly.
Yes.
So, anyways, I think we made the points that we want. I thought we covered all the good major parts. It got cut into 2 videos. I think the other one ended up getting blocked again. So I went and disputed it, and it went back up for a little bit, but I think it's down again.
Is it really?
Yeah. So they must have checked it, reviewed it, and said, no, we think you stole that content. That's bullshit. Because I wasn't. Anyways, I'm going to go get some food, and when we play my outro.
Oh, you got a super.
Another super?
One more. Yep.
Adam S., thank you for super chat.
Oh, no, I see the stream. It's up.
Some scholars, it's still up?
Yeah, it's still up.
Oh, good. I don't care if it's monetized at all. I don't give a shit about that. I just want it to be out there.
Yeah,
Some scholars believe that many of Jesus' disciples were teenagers when he called them. Jewish culture at the time typically began religious training for children as young as 5. Yeah. No, I mean, the Nisco thing, those are young men, typically teenagers to early 20s. So, yeah, that's probably what it is.
Yeah, I have a hard time. Yeah.
I don't think they're little babies running around. That just doesn't make any sense because they're all talking to Jesus and acting like they're all riding in boats and stuff. Like what are these boat people know how to operate ancient boats at 5? Like, come on, let's not get that crazy on it. But no, I would be surprised if people are learning Torah at 5, like little bits of Torah. Hey, did you hear the story about Jacob? Ooh, like it's probably how the things are today still.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for that super chat. I appreciate that. I will be back on here in a couple. I'm actually gonna do a live here pretty soon in a couple of days to review some of my beefs that I've been in. Do a little beef review of like all of the beefs that I've been in since I started this channel, and do like a where are they now thing. I want to do that very soon. That's coming up. I was gonna do it, and then the West Huff thing happened. I was like, I gotta respond to this. There's just too much going on here. But anyways, thanks for everyone for watching. You have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over